The universal order of the creation of matter. A reflection. Human intelligence has reached levels that, thanks to modern technologies, allow anyone to examine the knowledge they read to verify its logic and validity. I firmly believe that this work should be understood by all of humanity and not judged by a few whose self-interest could, and indeed has, hindered the dissemination of the knowledge revealed in this book. This book is written in such a way that anyone, regardless of their scientific background or interest in the workings of the universe, can fully grasp this new knowledge and actively participate in its understanding, as it is at the forefront of science and technology. This book presents a synthesis of the understanding of new fundamental principles of physics, compiled over more than 30 years of independent research and development, during which several functional prototypes and numerous tests with different loads have confirmed their correctness and operability. Mehran Tevakoli Keshe, 2009. Forward. In the technological and scientific evolution of humankind over thousands of years, the conversion of the states of matter and energy on Earth from one state to another has been key to its progress. For humanity to continue advancing in this evolution, it must learn, understand, and unravel the power of the initial fundamental particles of matter. In the following pages, new, simple theoretical principles and the results of tests conducted to unleash the power of the forces of the initial fundamental particles will be presented and analyzed. In my writing, I use simple language so that anyone, from any corner of the world, can read and understand the fundamental principles of their physical creation. In this way, every person on Earth will have the same basic knowledge and the opportunity to build their own environment and, thus, control their future and destiny. This simple transfer of knowledge empowers every human being, by understanding the principles of their created world, to utilize and enhance the fundamental forces of creation for their evolutionary progress. Through the proper application of this new knowledge, clean energy can be generated for survival anywhere in the universe. This is an energy production capacity that does not generate new waste that harms the environment or jeopardizes the survival of future generations. This new knowledge allows humans to produce food and medicine through the natural process of plasma formation, the fundamental building blocks of their cells. Therefore, no child, woman, or man should go hungry or depend on others for survival. This new knowledge gives humans the opportunity to produce all the materials they need, without depending on terrestrial resources, environmental conditions, or their location in the universe. This new knowledge allows humans to move and travel within their environment and throughout the universe with the protection of universal magnetic fields under any atmospheric or space conditions. This new knowledge grants humans freedom of movement, regardless of the environment or their location in the universe. Human beings will be able to use travel systems that remain within protected magnetic and gravitational field levels, such as those on Earth, since their physical bodies have adapted to the atmospheric conditions of their planet. Until now, this has been an unattainable dream in every sense, given the current level of scientific development. Human beings will take advantage of this new knowledge, adding their own scientific and technological advancements, as well as unique discoveries, to overcome their current problems and natural limitations. Our hope is that all human beings, regardless of race, skin color, creed, or religion, will use this new knowledge collectively and in unity for the progress of humanity. We pray that humankind will use this new knowledge and information to create peace and justice among their fellow human beings and other beings of God, creations and creatures with whom they will come into contact, regardless of their appearance, technological advancement, and intelligence. Mehran Tevakoli Keshe. In the progressive trajectory of human technological development, it has been demonstrated that humanity has not been able to create or produce fundamental energy systems similar to those operating in the vastness of the universe. However, it has managed to convert one form of energy into another and has harnessed the small energy surpluses released by these methods. In the universe, the structure, functioning, appearance, and existence of plasma and the atom do not differ so much from the relationships in interactions of their larger counterparts, such as molecules, solar systems, and galaxies. In current science, and with cutting-edge technology, the lowest-order particles that make up an atom in its nucleus are considered to be quarks and gluons. Science has never studied the progressive construction of plasma, Chapter 3, with the same foundations and principles as other larger matters and fields in the universal orders of creation and movement. This means that, for centuries, scientists have imposed certain unnecessary limitations on themselves when studying the physical realities of matter and its environment, in order to compare and draw parallels between these phenomena and principles. Understand the criteria by which the initial seeds of plasmas are established in the universe, and the mechanisms by which the different forces operate within them. Based on the basic knowledge available in the current scientific field, it is not difficult to discover what the real elementary particles of the universe are and to find an alternative and realistic explanation of how these fundamental plasma particles come together to create the initial seed of plasma. It is important to emphasize that the existence of dynamic magnetic fields with varying intensities, speeds, and densities, as well as their interactions, are the cause and foundation of the existence of matter in the universe. In the universe, sets of weak and unstable magnetic fields initiate the creation of plasma matter, which ultimately becomes its initial components. We consider rays as individual, directional magnetic forces. We understand fields as the magnetic force of a single ray, influenced by other rays and magnetic fields, thus creating a dynamic zone of influence in its path. We consider the same phenomenon in principle with respect to plasma and plasma magnetic fields. A plasma of magnetic fields is considered a set of similar rays and ray fields. The collective interactions of weak plasma magnetic fields in the universe are considered to constitute the foundation and basis for the creation of the initial fundamental particles. In the universe, the same sequential and consequential, regular and specific interactions of lesser magnitude in the intensity of plasma magnetic fields are considered to always lead to the formation of plasma and its submatter components. Throughout this book, an attempt has been made to establish a clear distinction between magnetic fields and plasma magnetic fields. Plasma magnetic fields are considered to be dynamic arrays of rays with nearly identical magnetic field intensities. We refer to plasma magnetic fields as plasmatic because they are magnetic fields that have separated from their source of creation, hence the use of the term plasmatic for these magnetic fields. For clarity, in this book, the term plasmatic refers to an array of dynamic magnetic fields, and not to the plasma state in its common usage, which alludes to a state of dynamic protons. Furthermore, the interactions of plasma particles with each other are considered to create effects similar to the gravitational and magnetic fields of matter, plasmas, planets, etc. These magnetic rays or fields, and their grouping as plasma magnetic fields, are known as initial fundamental particles. Therefore, we consider magnetic fields to be the real, fundamental particles. Current science considers quarks, among others, to be elementary particles. With the new understanding of the creation of matter and forces within the universal order of creation, in this book, when the term elementary particles is used, it is understood that magnetic fields and their forces are the new elementary particles. The existence and interaction of these magnetic fields gives rise to all the other effects observed in the universe, such as the creation of magnetic and gravitational fields, which in turn give rise to the creation of what I call different types of matter, antimatter, and dark matter, in the plasma, or what are currently known as quarks, etc. We consider dark matter to be an integral part of ordinary matter and an important component in the formation of the initial fundamental plasma of the universe. We do not consider it to be exotic, distant, and hidden matter. From this point on, in this book, we will refer to magnetic fields as the elementary particles and will no longer consider quarks and other particles as such. We consider these quarks of different colors, with up and down notation and spin, to be created as a result of the different interactions and attraction of these magnetic fields or fields. Plasmatic magnetic fields. Since it is now known that quarks are composed of simpler particles of magnetic fields, they can no longer be considered elementary particles. This book will explain how magnetic fields become the creators of quarks and other effects and forces within proton plasma, thus becoming the new elementary particles in physics. Furthermore, it explains how the different intensities of these fields lead to the creation of different types of matter and their forces, as observed by the scientific community. In addition, these weak particle clusters and their interactions with magnetic fields and the forces of turbulent magnetic fields in different parts of galaxies manifest as the seeds of atoms, stars, galaxies, and so on. Magnetic and gravitational fields, MAGRAFs. When we write magnetic field with a capital M, we mean the magnetic field of celestial objects, such as a star, a planet, etc. This magnetic field is always accompanied by the object's gravitational fields. We consider that gravitational and magnetic fields cannot exist in the universe without each other, and that they are produced simultaneously by the same dynamic materials and matter in the same region. Due to the presence of other matter in their area of influence, these fields can have different values, since the matter composition of the object determines which will be stronger and have a greater value than the other in that given location. The only known and possible objects whose gravitational and magnetic fields could have the same intensity, in most cases in the universe, are monomaterial objects, such as some stars, with a pure hydrogen content. There are cases in the universe where the monomaterial of these objects may be uranium or other heavier elements. These heavier monomaterial objects usually produce much more intense gravitational and magnetic fields, several orders of magnitude greater than those of hydrogen monomaterial objects. It is assumed that each universe cannot contain more than one monomagnetic star of heavy matter. It is important to note that the coexistence of these two fields, always interacting with other magnetic fields or plasmas, gives rise to the creation of a magnetosphere, whose boundary is the point of maximum equilibrium or equality between both forces. Any variation in the intensity of one of the two fields with respect to the other will create different effects. For example, this imbalance between the two fields is observed on Mercury, which lacks an atmosphere, and also on most moons in planetary systems. In this book, since one field cannot exist without the other, we use the term MAGRAFs to represent the magnetic and gravitational fields. Plasmas. We consider that plasma, in its collective existence, is a combination of different initial fundamental matter, created by the interaction of at least two plasma magnetic fields of equal intensity, the initial fundamental particles. Plasmas are considered a collection of interactions of plasma forces of matter, antimatter, and dark matter, along with other magnetic field forces, all simultaneously and within the sphere delimited by the plasma. Subsequently, in the process of interaction and grouping of these initial fundamental particles into specific combinations, atoms, molecules, matter, etc., are created. This exposition explains and discusses the simple connections between initial fundamental particles and initial fundamental plasmas. These groupings and specific interactions of initial fundamental particles and initial fundamental plasmas, as well as their interaction with other magnetic fields, manifest as states of matter. These states depend exclusively on the density and compactness of the magnetic field and appear as different states of matter, gases, liquids, and solids. In the following sections, we clearly distinguish between the states of matter, gases, liquids, and solids, referred to simply as matter, and the states of matter, antimatter, and dark matter, referred to simply as matter or matter. Initial gravitational fields. The interaction of different magnetic fields of varying intensity is considered to generate the initial gravitational fields for the creation of plasma particles, Figure 8b. The interaction of these fields is considered to create the field of attraction or gravitational field. Reactor technology. With the new knowledge and fundamental principles on the creation of particles and plasmas revealed in this book, and thanks to the techniques acquired in the systems of area. Through the design, development, and testing of these reactors, it has been possible to replicate the dynamics of the plasma environment, allowing different particles to be freed from the interaction of their magnetic fields within a reactor. Furthermore, within the structure of these reactors, it has become possible to manage and control these released fields and particles for specific, predetermined functions and applications. In these new reactors, by weakening the magnetic forces of the plasma, the Coulomb or energy barrier, and allowing the plasma matter to move more freely within the reactor, a reduction in the intensity of the magnetic fields is achieved. These reactors were designed to create an environment where the plasma matter can move freely in a mixture of matter, particles, and rays. Through the operation of these reactors, the Coulomb barrier becomes irrelevant in the overall structure of the matter mixture that confines the plasma's magnetic fields. Thanks to these new methods of manipulating the structure of plasma matter, plasma forces have been released within these reactors. By loosening the plasma's constituent substructure, powerful new effects and properties have been achieved from the plasma's fundamental, initially weak, magnetic fields. Until now, this knowledge and these methods were unknown in the scientific world. Within the structure of the developed simple nuclear systems, conditions are created that generate weak environmental dynamics, similar to the internal structure of plasma. The technology to create these conditions and the methods developed to loosen the structure of the plasma's magnetic fields will revolutionize current nuclear fusion and allow scientists to achieve their goals quickly and at a much lower cost than with current systems. This new cutting-edge technology employs much simpler, gentler, and more practical methods, very similar to the conditions in the universe, to achieve the fission and fusion of different materials and plasmas. Throughout this book, the reader will discover various future applications of this technology, so it will come as no surprise that we have filed several international patent applications to cover all aspects of the topics, principles, methods, and systems mentioned here and beyond. Plasma dilution, fission, and fusion. Current fusion methods and antimatter production technologies apply strong magnetic fields or high-speed plasma rotation, with little or no success. This is because the fundamental principle of the construction and structure of these plasma subparticles has never been fully understood. In our new, cutting-edge science and technology, a controlled environment is created within a multi-core reactor, facilitating and enabling the plasma subparticles to separate into their components. In these reactors, the effects of interactions between the newly released plasma subparticles are used to create new and more powerful internal and external magnetic forces. In state-of-the-art reactors, once the desired objectives are achieved, the system parameters can be modified to allow the separated parts of the plasma to regain their original properties and recombine as the original plasma. This technology makes it possible to create a weak magnetic field environment within the reactor core, where the plasma can open up and be freed from the forces of the interconnecting magnetic fields. The new dilution method for plasma opening is a more practical and gentler technique for the fission or fusion of plasmas and/or their subplasma components, allowing the utilization of their effects and properties. In current cutting-edge physics technology, scientists have opted for aggressive methods in the fission industry. For fusion, they have chosen high-speed plasma compression, using technology that induces giant magnetic fields to achieve their objectives. They employ accelerators to impact the plasma against a surface and extract subplasma components, such as antimatter. In the new, state-of-the-art plasma dilution technology, environments and conditions similar to a weak particle soup are created within the reactors, mirroring the internal structure of the plasma environment itself. In this new approach, by introducing fresh plasma into the reactor, its binding magnetic fields interact with fields of similar intensity to its own plasma magnetic fields, allowing its more concentrated fields of matter, antimatter, and other elements to be released and operate more freely within the particle soup environment of the reactor cores. Thanks to this cutting-edge science and technology, it has been. Astonishing achievements have been reported in recent years. With current technology, achieving these effects is considered virtually impossible, a pipe dream, and contrary to the known laws of physics. These effects, such as the ability to lift a reactor weighing several kilograms with just a few grams of gas, take advantage of the properties of the antimatter components of plasma and their interactions within the cores of these reactors. This new technology allows for the rapid and simple production of nanomaterials and their polymeric components, such as the atomic nanolayers known as sp2 graphene, the sp3 diamond atomic structure, and nanooxides, at room temperature and under atmospheric conditions, as has been independently confirmed by a prestigious Western organization. In fact, what has been achieved is the application of the soup principle to unravel the tangle of magnetic fields in plasma and release its underlying matter, such as antimatter, in a reactor. By utilizing the properties of the interaction of forces between polymeric components, the entanglement between plasma matter and/or its magnetic subfields, which are part of the structure of antimatter and dark matter, it has become possible to create more intense magnetic or gravitational fields within the confines of multi-core reactors and in relation to their surroundings. These magravs, if strong enough to interact with similar fields in their environment and with other fields of the same plasma components in other parts of the reactors, can generate lift and movement of the mass of the system to which the reactor is coupled. Scientists at Fermilab in the US claim that small quantities of antimatter, as little as a spoonful, can release enough energy equivalent to the launch of several space shuttles. This laboratory has confirmed that it has managed to collect some of this antimatter over the last 40 years, using special plasma separation and containment methods. Through new and simple plasma dilution methods, not only are the antimatter components separated from the plasma, but the interaction of the magnetic fields of this matter within the system is simultaneously harnessed to create strong magravs in its surroundings, thus generating lift and motion. The newly created magravs in these reactor cores, by interacting with the surrounding planetary magravs and attempting to find a new magrav equilibrium, for example, with respect to Earth, cause the magnetic fields to move the system. This method of achieving system motion due to the interaction of gravitational forces is known as Keshe's principle of gravitational positioning. This position is the point where the combined intensity of the gravitational and magnetic fields of the reactor system and Earth finds a new position where they balance each other. After reaching the required gravitational positioning, that is, the new height or distance relative to another gravitational force, such as Earth's, the system's internal parameters can be modified again to generate a new gravitational intensity within the reactor. At this point, the system must reach a new gravitational positioning equilibrium with respect to the planet. This forces the system to find a new equilibrium with respect to the planet's gravitational intensity and, consequently, to reach a new gravitational positioning relative to the planet's gravitational force. Upon reaching a new magrav positioning equilibrium, the movement of one system relative to another occurs. Thus, using this new magrav positioning method, the movement of spacecraft, vehicles, and energy production systems can be achieved without burning fuel or using current propulsion technology for launching relatively small payloads into space. Through the principles of magrav positioning, this is how the movements of atoms, planets, stars, and so on are created and achieved in the universe. Through testing, we can confirm that the movement of any mass in any magrav positioning system depends not on size, but on mass, where the smaller mass always tends to move relative to the larger mass in the universe. There are some exceptions to this general rule, such as in magrav positioning reactor systems, where controlling the intensity of the gravitational field within the reactor cores plays a crucial role in achieving lift, movement, and magnetic field protection for the system. As I've already mentioned, no one has ever seen a rocket on the back of the Earth that has been generating its movement for billions of years. Subsequently, if necessary, through the same modifications to the internal parameters of these new reactors, the components of plasma matter can be regrouped and returned to their original structural state, to their Permian levels and composition, once the desired effects have been achieved. Thanks to a new understanding and cutting-edge technology, and simply by following the universal methods and principles of matter creation, the components of matter, antimatter, and dark matter in plasma can be manipulated and used for the effective lifting and movement of objects, energy creation, the production of new matter, and so on. The dissemination of this new knowledge does not imply that the paths chosen so far by other scientists have been wrong, not at all. However, their achievements have been and continue to be limited due to their focus on the use of matter, its gaseous, liquid, and solid states, and even a limited view of plasma as the fourth state of matter, rather than our focus on the use of matter. It deals with the state of matter, antimatter, and dark matter, with their different components of plasma kinetic force. When using matter, it is necessary to burn fuel to overcome the forces of the gravitational field and reach a new position relative to the planet. However, with magrav positioning systems, the kinetic properties of plasma matter, matmags, are used to create magrav forces within the reactor, so that the system moves within the magrav forces of another object, such as Earth, and thus reaches a position relative to Earth's magrav forces. We consider that, just as magrav forces exist between matter, they also exist between antimatter and dark matter in plasma. This principle applies to the inertia of matter, antimatter, and dark matter in plasma. That is, in the universe, there are magrav forces of antimatter and magrav forces of dark matter, as well as inertia for all three. All matter and its effects can be used to create motion and produce energy in conjunction with other matter and plasma matter. Our newly revealed knowledge aims to achieve the same goal as other scientists and institutions, but thanks to this new understanding of plasma matter construction, we are achieving deeper and more powerful effects in simpler and less complicated ways than those employed until now. We consider this revelation to complement all other past and present scientific work and to break with complex and rigorous methods. In this revelation, you will come to understand how matter has formed since the beginning of time. Chapter 3. This chapter explains in simple terms the method of plasma and atom creation in the universe. It then explains how to use the internal structure of matter to generate large amounts of energy and teaches you how to use the principles of magnetic field interaction, which are the fundamental principles of the universal method for creating motion. We have tested Magrav's positioning systems for motion, and the results confirm the validity of the theoretical aspects of the approach. The future of space technology will be based on portable, safe, and easily positioned Magrav's nuclear reactors, which have already been developed and tested. Chapter 1. Historically unexplained principles. The main reason for the lack of understanding of the simple processes of plasma matter creation and control lies not so much in a lack of knowledge within the scientific community, either in the past or present. The lack of progress is largely due to the peer review obstruction mechanism created by some scientists to protect their financial interests and titles within their respective schools of thought and scientific fields. For example, despite having enormous research budgets and human resources, science has not made substantial progress in understanding the basic structure of plasma and its fusion in the last 60 years. Nuclear physicists and industry have attempted to induce the fusion of hydrogen atom plasmas in fusion reactors, built and under construction at a cost of billions of dollars. The structure and operation of these next-generation fusion reactors contradict the natural laws of physics and are contrary to how plasma fusion occurs in the universe. These reactors operate with almost zero gravitational field forces within their structure to attempt to achieve fusion, meaning that these systems lack the internal gravitational field forces necessary for simple fusion. Instead of the natural gravitational forces required for fusion, they attempt to replace them with strong external electromagnetic fields, using large coils and enormous amounts of energy to operate these systems, and then try to achieve fusion. This is like trying to bake bread with only water, salt, and heat, without its main ingredient, flour. The question these scientists face is simply, where are the gravitational fields essential for fusion in these reactors, and where are they supposed to come from? If the goal is to achieve a successful chain reaction of fusion like in the sun's core, where these forces reach thousands of Gs. In fact, by using gigantic external magnetic coils, they compress the plasma into more compact spheres and then attempt to fuse two of these spheres. This is why they have achieved, and will continue to achieve, very little if they persist down the wrong path that fusion technology is taking. Another point is that the advanced scientific world of the 21st century tends to believe in and accept the outdated 19th century principles regarding the creation of magnetic fields through convection at the center of the Earth, even when scientific seismological data indicates that another explanation is needed. For example, some colleagues believe that 21st century humans are not intelligent enough to discover how planetary gravitational fields are created. According to these colleagues, the principle of creating gravitational field forces and controlling them is currently beyond the understanding of other scientists. In contrast, new magnetic and gravitational field positioning systems, which have been developed and tested, confirm the ability to generate lift and movement using only the effects of matter's magnetic fields, matmags, without burning fuel or using propulsion technology. Within current 21st century knowledge and proven science, there are several unacceptable points regarding principles accepted in previous centuries, such as the creation of the planet's magnetic fields through convection. Creation of Earth's magnetic fields. The scientific hypothesis on the creation of Earth's magnetic fields is based on the understanding of the dynamo principle from previous centuries. This principle accepted that current production began with the movement of a high-temperature fluid in the outer core at the Earth's center due to the heating and fluidity of the matter within this core. It was thought that electrons from the atoms of matter were released or detached from their atoms, vibrating or floating freely in this region. The rotation of the planet's solid metal inner core interacted with these free electrons in the outer core, resulting in the creation of the planet's magnetic field. If this assumption is entirely correct, how do other planets and stars create their magnetic fields? Stars like the Sun possess magnetic fields, but they do not have solid inner cores like Earth. The Sun generates magnetic fields that extend beyond Earth and Saturn. The first shortcoming of this convection theory of electron movement lies in the fact that we know the plasma of an atom is a charged entity and possesses charges much more intense, by several orders of magnitude, than its smaller counterpart, the electron. Therefore, it is more likely that the main force of the planet's magnetic field is created by plasma charges rather than electron charges. With current knowledge, we know that even the electron exists in a plasma state, similar to the structure of the proton. Two interacting plasma magnetic fields in the Earth's inner core give rise to the creation of the planet's magnetic field. Note, the Caroline core may contain plasmas, atoms, nanomaterials, molecules, various materials, hydrogen, potassium, uranium, and plutonium due to nuclear decay, fission, possible fusion, and the ionization of matter, which generates heat in this core. This heat is transferred through the solid inner core to maintain the matter of the outer core in a fluid state. Thanks to current knowledge in plasma physics and studies in the nuclear fusion industry, it is known that the dynamic protons, plasmas, of atoms are positively charged entities and generate their own currents, according to the Birkeland current principle. It is through this principle of current creation and the dynamism of plasma in the center of stars that the main forces of the sun's magnetic and gravitational fields are generated, and not through the principle of convection. Secondly, if plasma exists in the center of the planet, which is possible, then the convection theory for the production of Earth's magnetic field has limited validity, and it is possible that part of the planet's magnetic field is also created partially through the principles of convection. Creation of Earth's gravitational fields. Another important concept, which represents an obstacle to the development of new knowledge, is understanding how the gravitational fields of planets are created. This is a concept that has not been fully understood until now. The creation and maintenance of gravitational field forces in stars and planets have become, unnecessarily, the holy grail of science for the scientific community. In fact, the creation of the gravitational fields of the planets and stars in the universe is as simple as the creation of their magnetic fields. The hypocrisy lies in the fact that both the scientific community and a young child, of school age, agree on one principle: that two opposite poles of solid magnets attract each other, exerting a mutual gravitational force. It is an accepted fact that opposite poles of magnetic fields can interact. Magnetic fields create attractive forces, or gravitational fields, between themselves and with the surrounding matter. Therefore, it is correct to assume that for a gravitational field to exist in a planetary system, gravitational forces must be generated in a similar way, through the same principles of attraction and interaction of at least two magnetic fields at the planet's center. Thus, the planet's gravitational fields must have formed from the interaction of two or more sources of magnetic fields with each other at the centers of planets or stars, fields that can extend beyond the physical boundaries of these objects. The existence of magnetic and gravitational field forces around Earth confirms and supports this theory. It is understood that two independent regions must be necessary to create magnetic field forces within the structure of the planet's inner core, and that their interaction gives rise to the planet's gravitational field forces. Consequently, the fact that Earth possesses gravitational fields confirms and indicates the existence and operation of at least two independent regions of magnetic field forces in the planet's central cores, fields G1 and G2. The interaction of these two magnetic fields, fields G1 and G2, generated in the planet's central cores, gives rise to the creation of attractive forces, or gravitational fields, similar to the attractive fields of opposite poles in solid magnets. It is a known fact that planets and stars are composed of different layers of different materials. Similarly, stars are composed of the same material, hydrogen, which, due to variations in compression and temperature, is created in layers within these objects. The same matter in different layers creates, behaves, and exhibits slightly different properties and effects. These different layers produce magnetic fields of slightly different intensity than those of adjacent layers. Thus, layers of plasma or fluid materials at different depths within stars and planets create their own independent magnetic fields at the centers of these celestial bodies. Due to their proximity, the magnetic fields created in each dynamic layer of the cores of these celestial bodies inevitably interact with the magnetic fields generated in the layers above or below. The interactions between these magnetic fields in the different layers are considered similar to the interactions of the magnetic fields of solid magnets. In the case of the inner cores of stars and planets, the magnetic fields are created in plasma or fluid states of matter. In these cases, the dynamic materials flowing in the inner layers of celestial objects cannot physically couple with each other through the magnetic fields generated by each layer, as occurs with solid magnets. This is because the atoms and molecules in these layers are in constant motion and are displaced by other forces, both by the matter present in their respective layers and by the effects and forces of other layers. However, the magnetic fields created by each dynamic layer interact with the magnetic fields of adjacent layers. These interactions of magnetic fields in different layers generate both attractive and repulsive magnetic fields between the materials of the different layers. Therefore, in the same regions and with the same matter, magnetic fields of similar polarities in different layers interact, and two magnetic fields of similar polarities, fields M1 and M2, repel each other. This repulsion between magnetic fields, fields M1 and M2, becomes the outward pumping field force, known as the planet's magnetic field strength, field M. Furthermore, magnetic fields of opposite polarities in these layers interact simultaneously and in a similar manner. This interaction, fields G1 and G2, results in the creation of magnetic fields that attract or repel each other. This magnetic attraction force, fields G1 and G2, becomes the inward attraction force, known as the planet's gravitational field force, G field. Through tests conducted over several years by constructing configurations similar to those of planetary inner cores, Keshe theory on the creation of the gravitational field of dynamic objects with dynamic cores states that the outward forces of dynamic magnetic fields of planets and stars are created by the interaction of the same materials and in the same layers, just like their dynamic gravitational field forces. Two interacting plasma magnetic fields in the Earth's inner core give rise to the creation of the gravitational field forces of the planet. The magnetic field forces of planets originate from the interaction of similar polarities of plasma magnetic fields of matter in the dynamic layers of their inner cores, M field, which radiate outward. The gravitational field forces, G field, are created by the interaction of opposite polarities of plasma magnetic fields of the same matter in the same layers of planetary cores, creating gravitational attraction inward toward these celestial bodies. This new understanding of the interaction of multiple magnetic fields in the inner cores of planets provides a new definition, a new understanding, and a new explanation of how gravitational force is produced. Field forces are created in celestial objects with multiple inner cores and central dynamics, such as Earth and the Sun. Gravity can now be defined in terms of its actual basis and what leads to its manifestation, strength, existence, and control. Therefore, gravitational field forces are magnetically based fields, and according to Keshe theory, gravity is defined as the measure of the interaction and attraction of two or more magnetic field forces or dynamic plasma intensities created within a system. This definition coincides with Newton's, with the caveat that two bodies cannot possess forces of attraction or mutual gravitation without the existence of magnetism. Certainly, the attraction and interaction of plasma forces vary with the position of two objects and depend on the distance and the intensity of the fields. If celestial objects do not possess magnetic fields of sufficient intensity to interact with each other, how could they attract one another? Thus, the gravitational field can now be understood and explained in terms of its origin, due to the interaction and attraction of particles generated within the dynamic nuclei of celestial objects. Secondly, since the gravitational fields of these planets or stars depend on the intensity of the magnetic fields, it can now be understood why their attraction depends on position. Therefore, gravity, in its simplest form, can be defined as the measure of the interaction and attraction of two or more magnetic rays or magnetic field systems of two or more entities, based on the intensity and position of each at any point in matter, plasma, planets, solar systems, galaxies, and the universe. This new definition of gravitational fields expands current knowledge and stems from a new understanding of the interactions of plasma magnetic fields among the components of matter. Another proposal is as follows. We can assume that human cells and the matter of other objects, composed of atoms, plasma, and magnetic fields, can behave as possessing a second magnetic field with respect to any other plasma magnetic field in their environment. Therefore, it is possible that the plasmonic activity of these cells and matter, in their interaction with the plasmonic dynamics of the planet, could behave as and replace the principles of the interacting double magnetic field system necessary for the creation of the gravitational phenomenon. Furthermore, it can be stated that any substance possessing plasma or nuclei exerts gravitational attraction toward the planet. If this is correct and applicable, then this could be another reason why a single planetary magnetic field would be sufficient to generate gravitational attraction toward any object within its area of influence. That is, a single magnetic field would be sufficient for the gravitational attraction of the plasma toward the planet to be generated and exist. However, this concept may have a shortcoming, since gravitational and magnetic fields, magravs, are required simultaneously for both objects to have freedom of movement and constant position. In this book, we attempt to distinguish between the magnetic fields of matter and the magnetic fields created by the dynamic interaction of two magnetic rays, two magnetic fields, or two particles. In the case of plasmas and planets, where the magnetic and gravitational fields always occur together, we use the capital letter M to refer to the magnetic field. In these references, instead of writing magnetic and gravitational fields, we abbreviate them as magravs, which means the strength of the magnetic fields relative to the position of the other. The gravitational field strength of one celestial body relative to another is a measure of the attraction and interaction of the intensity of a plasma magnetic field created within one system relative to another. The origin of heat in the Earth's core. Another unanswered question in geophysics is, where does Keshe come from? How exactly does the heating of Earth's solid inner core keep the materials of the outer core in a fluid state? Secondly, how and by what method is heat generated in the planet's inner cores? These questions have not been addressed with complete clarity to date in planetary science. It is generally accepted that Earth retains heat in its inner cores. I consider the Caroline core to be a geonuclear reactor, known as a georeactor. It is not difficult to assume that radioactive materials exist in this new central core of the planet, leading to the heating of the planet's inner cores. In general, nuclear geophysicists and I agree on this, to a certain extent, although with differences regarding the type of matter and the process of generating such heating. Geophysicists primarily consider that the heat in the Caroline core is generated by the nuclear decay of heavy elements, which have sunk toward the planet's center due to their weight. As a nuclear engineer who has built several simple nuclear reactors that replicate the structure of Earth's inner cores and achieve similar effects in creating masses similar to Earth's, I believe that matter, plasmas, hydrogen atoms, carbon atoms, radioactive matter, and other materials, together, form part of the mixture of matter that makes up the Caroline core. It can now be clearly explained that the main cause of heat generation in the planet's inner cores is, or can be, nuclear decay, plasma activity, nuclear fission, and the possible nuclear fusion of materials in the Caroline core. The materials in this very high-temperature region are, and can be considered, in a fluid state, just as current geophysicists have considered the condition of the materials in the planet's outer core. Due to its fluidity, the matter in this region can generate its own dynamic magnetic fields, due to the dynamic movement of the fluid matter in this section of the planet. These fields can interact with the planet's dynamic solid inner core. This is similar, in principle, to what geophysicists have assumed, that magnetic field forces occur between the inner and outer core regions of the planet. Secondly, due to the plasmas and charged electrons and their movement within this core, these could be partially responsible for creating the planet's second magnetic field force. With the discovery of the second cavity, the Caroline core, in the planet's inner core, it becomes clear that second magnetic fields can be created, and indeed are created, at the very center of the planet. There, the solid core acts as a dividing wall between the two regions of dynamic matter at the planet's center, the fluid matter in the Caroline core and the fluid matter in the outer core. Thus, the fundamental principle of gravity can be explained by the interaction of two sources of dynamic magnetic fields at the planet center, as discussed in the previous section. Therefore, the interaction between two particles on either side of the solid core is the source of the planet's plasma magnetic fields. What causes the Earth's rotation? Another unexplained, yet accepted, phenomenon is the Earth's rotation. How is the Earth's rotation created and maintained? What causes and determines the planet's constant rotation speed, regardless of its location in the solar system? The way in which planetary rotation is generated has never been explained by science. The existence of two independent magnetic forces, magnetic fields M1 and M2, and magnetic fields G1 and G2, on either side of the planet's inner solid core may help explain the next mystery in the world of geophysics, through Keshe's theory on the principle of planetary rotation. It is known that magnetic fields possess forces that can exert pressure on an object and are capable of causing it to move. The existence, continuous maintenance, and interaction of the two dynamic forces, M1 and M2 fields and G1 and G2 fields, on either side of the planet's solid inner core partially explain the sources of the fields that exert forces on this core, causing its motion. It has been explained that the interaction of two dynamic magnetic fields on either side of the solid inner core gives rise to the planet's gravitational forces. Likewise, the interaction and exertion of these same magnetic forces on the planet's solid inner core exert magnetic pressure on it, causing its motion, G1 and G2 fields. The total effect of the forces of the magnetic and gravitational fields of each core on the solid inner core are denoted as G1 and G2. The interaction of the plasma magnetic fields in Earth's inner core gives rise to the planet's rotation. The solid inner core confines the materials in the central and outer cores. The materials of the inner cores are confined by other matter at the outer boundaries of this core. These two cores are considered to contain a constant volume and weight of matter. Therefore, it is possible to assume that the magnetic field forces created by each core will be constant and will remain on both sides of the planet's solid inner core for a very long time, billions of years. Consequently, the balance of magnetic field forces exerted on the metallic inner solid core by both magnetic fields on either side of the solid inner core will determine the rotation speed of the planet's solid core. Therefore, based on the principles of viscosity and friction of the materials within the planet, the final rotational speed of the entire planet is considered to be determined by the movement of the planet's solid inner core. This movement is transmitted to the outer layers of the planet and becomes the planet's final rotational speed. Thus, the planet's rotational speed is determined by the magnetic interactions of its inner core on the solid core. In general, this rotational speed is independent of the planet's position in its solar system and the overall effect of external magnetic forces exerted by other planets and the star of the solar system. Therefore, the Earth's rotational speed over a 24-hour period is entirely dictated by the influence of the magnetic fields of other cores on the planet's solid core, as explained, and not necessarily by other factors. This principle of constant rotational speed of celestial objects should hold true for all dynamic celestial objects with cores of thermally dynamic materials, and this rotation is independent of the temperature of the inner core, the outer layers, and the surrounding environment. Through laboratory tests with reactors similar to those used in the construction of Earth's inner core, we have concluded that the rotational speed of celestial objects and matter, as well as the generation of magnetic intensity, are independent of temperature. The rotation of a planet is generated by the same principle as the linear motion of Japan's current magnetic levitation, maglev, rail system, with the difference that, due to the spherical shape of the planet's solid inner core, the motion generated in this case will be rotational rather than linear. We can consider this principle to be universal. The difference between matter, with a capital M, and matter, with a lowercase m. Another inexplicable phenomenon in the world of physics has been the understanding and difference between matter, with a capital M, of nuclear transfer, and matter, with a lowercase m, of electrical and heat transfer, in relation to one another. In this book, we establish a clear distinction between matter, with a capital M, and matter, with a lowercase m, at all levels of universal order of materials, where matter is truly understood as a package of matter, antimatter, and dark matter. These three types of matter are composed of plasma magnetic fields of different intensities, and their intensity depends on that of the others. They are the three main components of plasma. Each type of matter possesses plasma magnetic fields of different intensities, which generates different magnetic fields, different magnetic field intensities, and different masses for each type of matter. These characteristics are independent of the other two types of matter present in the plasma and of the surrounding environment. Matter, with a capital M, refers to the material component of plasma. Matter, with a capital M, becomes matter, with a lowercase h, when it reaches levels where the forces of plasma magnetic fields and the movement of these forces in their environment determine the compaction of its components and their appearance within the plasma, causing matter to manifest as a gas, liquid, or solid. These forces are created due to the interactions of magnetic particles, the dynamism of the environment, and other factors. Furthermore, the intensity of plasma magnetic fields depends on contact friction. The friction of magnetic particles within matter often causes changes in its state by modifying the forces of the plasma magnetic fields, giving rise to phenomena such as light, heat, and so on. It is the forces of the external field, and not the intensity of the surrounding field, that determine the compaction of plasma matter, so that magnetic particles become physical matter and become visible or tangible to the human senses, such as smell or the appearance of matter in a solid, gaseous, or liquid state. It is then that matter comes to be called matter. The principle of the intensity of magnetic fields of matter is very different from that of the intensity of magnetic fields in matter. When we consider working with matter for space technology, the term fuel is not applicable. Therefore, the term magnetic matter supply is used. Renamed matmags, it is a source of matter, dark matter, and antimatter, used in reactors for the production of magravs, which enable the operation of gravity positioning reactors. In these reactors, the amount of matter needed and the intensity of its magnetic fields can be determined to achieve the desired effects. Since the term fuel refers only to the material level, where fuels are burned by the ignition of matter, the magnetic fields of matter, in the form of magravs, are manipulated to create the desired effect. These magnetic fields can be reversed to any other state of matter without being lost. The only difference lies in the fact that the intensity of magnetic fields can vary after matter processing, although in practice, magnetic fields of varying intensity are obtained. How does the movement of matter and antimatter originate? The first question we must ask ourselves is how matter, antimatter, and dark matter are created in the universe. Secondly, how is the regular and independent movement of matter, dark matter, and antimatter, and of elements, electrons, atoms, particles, planets, stars, and galaxies, created and maintained in the universe without the combustion of any fuel? The scientific community has not offered a realistic, fundamental explanation applicable to all levels, sizes, and positions in the universe. In the following chapters of this book, I will reveal how matter, gases, liquids, and solids, and antimatter, antimatter, and dark matter move in the universe as fundamental elements of creation. Furthermore, it will be explained how plasmas, electrons, planets, and stars acquire and maintain their motion in the vastness of the universe. Motion in the universe is achieved by fully understanding how matter forms in its simplest form, from the genesis of the initial fundamental particles, how they bind together, and how they respond to the magnetic field forces of each other. It is understood that the interactions of all the constituents, the magnetic field forces in matter and plasma, give rise to the creation of the motion of plasmas, electrons, planets, and stars, etc. How is light created? Current physics accepts that light is created by the decrease in an electron's energy from one energy level to a lower one, or to its ground state. In this book, we will explain how light is created in the universe, where there are actually no electrons present in the plasma-saturated environment. Another unanswered question is whether the speed of light is the maximum speed in the material world. In the scientific community, it is believed that the speed of light is the maximum speed that any particle of matter can reach. I believe this assumption is incorrect for all states of matter, dark matter, and antimatter. The assumption that the speed of light is the maximum speed can only be correct for interactions between matter and the matter components of the three basic states, matter, antimatter, and dark matter. I believe that plasma possesses all three states of matter, dark matter, and antimatter. Secondly, the assumption that the speed of light is the maximum speed may be partially correct and applicable, but only for a limited fraction of time and under specific conditions of matter, and not necessarily only in a vacuum. Matter itself is only a small part of the larger components of plasma in the universe. There are too many physical facts present in the everyday workings of the universe that refute the idea that the speed of light is the maximum speed. These new theories will be discussed in more detail in Chapter 7, entitled Speed of Light. A large number of physicists worldwide do not accept such a limitation on the speed of matter in the universe. Chapter 2. Interaction of Plasma Magnetic Fields, PMFs. In the universe, the intensity of magnetic fields dates back to the origin of its creation. The intensity of magnetic fields, in reference terms, is the power of the magnetic fields. These fields are essentially created from the potential difference with respect to their source, and the flow rate of these fields from the source becomes their current. Therefore, the closer the source and the greater the flow rate, the greater the field strength. This principle of magnetic field creation and intensity is explained in detail in the article titled "The Creation of Magnetic Fields." To understand the ways and simplicity with which gravitational field strength is generated under plasma conditions, it is fundamental to. Since this principle holds true in planetary and stellar systems, we can state that the method of creation and production of magnetic and gravitational fields in galaxies, stars, planets, molecules, atoms, and plasma is the same, regardless of their physical size. It is important to emphasize that this applies to all scales of the universal order of creation. In other words, stars are composed of much denser, larger, and stronger, on the order of magnitude, plasma magnetic fields than those of plasma and electrons, which exhibit plasma magnetic fields of lesser magnitude. However, the same principle of structural formation applies to the magnetic structure of stars as well as to that of an atom, plasma, and the electron. On a large scale, the densest, strongest, and largest magnetic fields, such as those of the Earth, the Sun, or galaxies, can be easily observed and detected. To the same extent and on the same order of scale and magnitude, plasmas and electrons possess, are composed of, and follow the same principles of interaction and attraction of magnetic fields, and retain their different materials and forces, just like a star or a galaxy. In contrast, the existence of smaller particles that make up the physical structure of plasma, due to the very weak intensity of their magnetic fields, can be confirmed primarily through the physical existence of the plasma itself, its behavior, and its properties. Through our own tests, conducted over several years, it is evident that plasmas possess their own magnetic field forces, which originate from the interactions of combinations of different magnetic field forces within their structure. In fact, if plasma did not create and maintain internal magnetic field forces, it could not retain its fundamental particles, which are necessary for its existence. According to Keshe's theory of gravity, the existence of magnetic forces, as well as the existence of a magnetosphere in the plasma, confirms the existence and interaction of at least two plasma magnetic fields within this structure. Furthermore, if plasma did not possess a magnetic field, it would be affected by. Other plasmas exist in its surroundings, such as the plasmas in the nuclei of heavier atoms. Since plasma is a freely moving entity that maintains a certain distance from other plasmas in its surroundings, this confirms the existence of magnetic and gravitational fields, which are maintained internally and emanate from the plasma itself. Unless proven otherwise, we can assume that all plasmas are composed of the same type of particles, with the same structure and configuration. Therefore, we can safely state that all plasmas are composed of identical matter and generate identical magnetic forces within their structure. We consider neutrons, protons, and especially electrons to possess a plasma structure that differs only in its particle content. Thus, atoms of different matter possess distinct energetic and physical properties due solely to the level of overall physical properties of their plasmas. From this point forward in this book, all hydrogen atoms are considered to possess and always will possess the same properties, have the same structure, and be composed of similar internal physical and material properties. Therefore, it is assumed that the initial fundamental plasmas, or neutrons, must always have the same composition and specific physical properties for all plasmas of all atoms. Furthermore, it can be stated that all initial fundamental plasmas generate identical and similar plasma magnetic forces. Until proven otherwise, it is correct to assume that most plasmas have the same characteristics, properties, dimensions, and magnetic density, as well as the same field strength. Therefore, it is correct to assume that most plasmas in the universe are composed of the same collection of plasma interactions. Consequently, it is correct to assume that to have a plasma with specific characteristics and specific magnetic forces, the plasma must be composed of specific magnetic configurations and be capable of achieving them. From the observation of the motion of plasmas in the universe, it is clear that not all sets of plasma particles are connected to a specific source. They mainly float freely in space and are composed of magnetic fields of varying intensity. Some of these plasmas interact with others of the same intensity. These interactions give rise to the creation of plasma magnetic forces within their space and with respect to other plasmas floating in their respective environments. Initially, when plasmas of similar intensity approach each other, their interacting fields intertwine, initiating a new cycle of magnetism with respect to other plasmas and magnetic fields in their surroundings. Subsequently, as more plasmas of different field intensities gather due to the initial strength of their magnetic fields, the formation of new, different materials begins. The accumulation of these different materials and fields, along with their interactions, leads to the creation of the initial fundamental plasma at a specific location in space. Plasmas are considered to always form in the same way, through the same process, by accumulating plasmas of the same strength and using the same interaction procedure of the fields within their structure. Therefore, plasmas are said to be composed of entangled specific plasma magnetic fields, ESPMs, and this composition is considered to be the same for all plasmas in general. Chapter 3. The initial fundamental particles of plasma. The initial fundamental particles of plasma are considered to be a set of weak plasma magnetic fields that originally existed in galaxies. These are remnants of the different plasma magnetic field activities of matter, released by the interaction of different magnetic fields through processes such as stellar fission and fusion. Some of these weaker plasma magnetic fields are considered to be released into the environment by the nuclear decay of atoms. Some weak plasma fields are continuously created in denser environments by the interaction and friction of two denser or more intense plasma magnetic fields, while other weaker plasma magnetic fields are generated by the collision or friction of matter in the universe. Due to their very low intensity, plasma magnetic fields are generally considered to exist and move in groups in different parts of the universe. Each group can be composed of plasma magnetic fields of varying magnitudes. Initial fundamental particles of plastic magnetic fields. It is important to remember that when we talk about gravitational field forces, magravs, we are referring to gravitational fields. Gravitational and magnetic fields of any entity that possesses them, generated simultaneously by the interaction of two or more plasma magnetic fields. It is crucial to remember that a situation cannot exist in which there are gravitational fields and no magnetic fields within a system, nor vice versa. Creation of plasma matter through the interaction of magnetic particles. The following is a 9-minute exercise for the imagination. In it, we share, as best we could, some examples that would require the images from the original book for better understanding. This section will most likely be republished in the future in the Spanish Keshe, with images that will help us for perfect integration. Imagine that plasma is formed from 3 initial groups of magnetic fields. Keshe calls these groups packets A, B, and C. Each contains magnetic fields of different intensities. The process begins when some of the fields in packets A and B have the same intensity. When they coincide, they merge and form a small nucleus. This core is the first set of magnetic and gravitational forces, which we call G1. G1 represents the matter component within the plasma. The remaining fields from A and B, those that didn't match in intensity, remain around G1 in constant motion. This remaining set is called P1, the set of remaining magnetic fields from A and B. Over time, P1 encounters the third packet, packet C. Upon interaction, something new occurs. Some of the fields in C also have intensities similar to some of those in P1, and they are added to the G1 core. This doesn't make it stronger, but it does make it denser. In other words, it increases its mass. But something else, even more important, happens. The most intense field of P1 interacts with the most intense field of packet C. This interaction creates a new core, much stronger than G1. This new core is called G2, and it corresponds to what we consider the antimatter region within the plasma. G2 does not replace G1. It coexists with it as another independent, more intense, but connected region. From here, we have a larger set, which we will call P2. It includes G1, includes G2, and also all the fields that remained unpaired from the 3 original packets. Then a third step occurs. Among the residual fields, those that did not form either G1 or G2, some managed to create a new region of gravitational force called G3. This region has equilibrium between its internal forces and its surroundings, so it does not generate a visible magnetosphere. That is why it appears dark. The text identifies it as the zone of dark matter. Thus, the plasma is composed of three main nuclei or regions: G1 matter, G2 antimatter, G3 dark matter. Each is independent, but all coexist as parts of the same system. Then a fourth phenomenon appears. The remaining particles that did not find a partner or coincide in intensity accumulate in the center between G1, G2, and G3. They form a dynamic, toroidal structure called F1. It has no gravity of its own, but it does have magnetic motion. Keshe compares this region to what is popularly called a wormhole, a place where the movement of the field can accelerate objects passing through it, although it doesn't necessarily transport them to any specific location. Finally, all these parts, G1, G2, G3, F1, and the residual fields between them, form what Keshe calls the initial fundamental plasma. This fundamental plasma is described as a balanced entity, very similar, according to him, to the structure of the neutron, and it represents what the text calls the universal order of the creation of matter. The model starts with three initial packets of plasma magnetic fields, packets A, B, and C. And within each packet, there are fields of different intensities, labeled A1 to A5, B1 to B5, and C1 to C5. Formation of the first maggrav, G1 matter. The first step occurs when the weakest but equivalent fields of packet A and packet B coincide in intensity. This coincidence allows them to couple dynamically and form the first set of plasma magnetic and gravitational forces. This set is designated G1 and constitutes the core of the plasma's matter. The fields that do not coincide, A2 to A5 and B2 to B5, remain in motion around G1. These residual fields, which retain dynamism and cannot couple with each other, organize themselves into a dynamic packet known as P1. Thus, after the first step, we have G1, the matter zone, formed by the union of equivalent fields. P1, the remaining magnetic fields of A and B. Interaction with packet C and creation of G2, antimatter. In the second step, P1 encounters the third packet, packet C. Two simultaneous processes occur. Increase in G1 density. Some fields in C have similar intensity to some of the internal fields of G1. When they combine with it, they do not increase the strength of G1, but rather its density, which increases the plasma mass in that nucleus. Creation of a new, more intense maggrav, G2. The more intense field within P1 interacts with the more intense field of packet C. This interaction generates a new set of magnetic and gravitational forces stronger than G1. This new set is G2, identified as the antimatter region of the plasma. G1 and G2 are independent, but interconnected through the remaining fields of packets A, B, and C. At this point, the structure is called P2 and includes G1 matter, G2 antimatter, residual fields of A, B, and C. Creation of the residual maggrav G3 dark matter. The third step occurs when some of the residual fields not incorporated into G1 or G2 balance each other and generate an additional region of gravitational force, G3. G3 is unique because its external force is in equilibrium with the plasma environment. It does not produce a visible magnetosphere. Its magnetic interaction is too weak to emit detectable light. Therefore, although it has gravity, it appears as a dark region, identified as the dark matter component of the plasma. At this point, there are three magravs: G1 matter, G2 antimatter, G3 dark matter. Formation of the toroidal field F1 dynamic central region. In the fourth step, the remaining uncoupled free particles accumulate in the central region between G1, G2, and G3. These particles form a spherical magnetic field with a toroidal morphology called F1. Its characteristics are: it does not possess a central gravitational force. It is composed of fields of non-coincident intensities. It acts as a dynamic region that can transfer momentum and energy. The text associates it with the phenomenon known as a wormhole, not as a stable space tunnel, but as a zone where objects can experience rapid acceleration due to the dynamism of the fields. Transition zones. Between G1, G2, G3, and F1, there are also scattered fields. These fields form plasma transition zones, where the intensities temporarily equalize between different regions. These zones energize the various regions, balance the dynamic behavior of the plasma, and allow temporary connections between the magnetospheres of different matters. Formation of the initial fundamental plasma. When G1, G2, G3, F1, and the residual fields reach a joint equilibrium, the complete structure functions as a unified entity. Keshe calls this structure initial fundamental plasma, or Keshe's model of the universal order of the creation of matter. This plasma is described as analogous to the structure of the neutron, with G1 as matter, G2 as antimatter, G3 as dark matter, F1 as the internal toroidal field, and the transition zones as the intermediate dynamic spaces. The final assembly is a self-sustaining, balanced system formed entirely by interactions of dynamic plasma fields. Excellent. Section lacking fundamental images for a clear visualization of the shared information. Overcome. Morphological structure of plasma matter. At the same time, the initial fundamental plasma maintains a global and external magrograph created by matter and all the morphological fields within its boundaries. Therefore, the internal equilibrium of the plasma's magnetic fields does not imply that it lacks magrograv with respect to its external environment. However, due to the existence of magrograv in its component structure, the initial fundamental plasma maintains a magnetosphere independent of its surroundings. When considering the proton or neutron as plasma, it is necessary to address all the plasma's components, that is, the matter component, what has been considered as matter. Fundamental matter, part of the atom's nucleus, antimatter, dark matter, the magnetic fields of the spherical torus, and the transition magnetic fields constitute a plasma and must be considered as a single entity. A plasma cannot exist in which none of these three elements participate. At the point in the life cycle of an initial fundamental plasma where the shared magnetic fields of the transition zones, or magnetic fields of one of the plasma elements, are partially depleted, the balance of the magnetic fields is disrupted, and the binding forces between the magnetic fields become unbalanced. The initial fundamental plasma disintegrates into a substructure of new, balanced magnetic fields of the same matter. In this way, the initial fundamental plasma finds a new, balanced combination within its own matter and the fields in its environment. I call this process of the initial fundamental plasma splitting to find new, smaller, balanced plasmas for magnetic field equilibrium the disintegration of the initial fundamental plasma. The disintegration of the initial fundamental plasma always leads to the creation of at least two new, smaller, balanced plasmas with the same configuration. One plasma with a greater amount of matter and a larger size, and a smaller plasma with less matter and fewer particles than the original fundamental plasma. However, the two new plasmas and their contents must maintain the overall balanced structure of the initial fundamental plasma. This is necessary for both plasmas to survive in their environment as a single entity. The disintegration of the initial fundamental plasma into two new components is considered the creation of the new proton and electron of an atom. However, as the components of the new plasma reposition and rebalance during this disintegration process, residual particles or magnetic fields, unnecessary for the positioning of the two new entities, are released. The release of these unwanted fields, which hinder the equilibrium interaction between the two new plasmas, results in the release of packets of magnetic fields in the form of different beams or energies originating from the division of the initial fundamental plasma. This release can manifest in various forms, such as a mixture of rays, particles, packets of sound energy, etc. I consider this process of disintegration of the initial fundamental plasma, of its three components and fields, as a new universal fundamental principle, which on larger scales is called the nuclear decay of atoms. Redefined quarks. In current science, elementary particles are considered to be quarks, among others, but we now know that quarks are themselves composed of fundamental magnetic fields and their interactions. The mass of the quark is produced by the interaction of these plasma magnetic fields through the principle of gravity. What is currently called the spin of quarks, we now understand to be the natural dynamic motion of matter created in the plasma environment through the interaction and magnetic positioning of the dynamic matter of the plasma. What current science considers the colors of quarks are, in reality, the different components of the interactions of plasma magnetic field intensities that give rise to the creation of gravity and magnetic fields with their global interaction. This effect, with respect to their surroundings, leads to the creation of the magnetosphere of each plasma particle, the magnetosphere of matter, dark matter, and antimatter in the plasma's magnetic environment, or of the neutron, proton, or electron. This means that the quark cannot be considered an elementary particle, since it has subcomponents and is composed of magnetic fields. Therefore, I consider the new elementary particle to have its origin in magnetic fields, which explains why all kinds of effects are observed, such as quarks, bosons, and the spin of dynamic matter in the plasma, etc. All of this can be explained simply as a result of the interaction of different intensities of magnetic fields, which make up the structure of the plasma matter and other magnetic fields present in that structure. Even on the largest scale, this initial model of fundamental plasma decay is what cosmologists observe in galaxies as the collapse of stars, which constitute and can be considered the initial fundamental plasma, and their reappearance in new, smaller components of stars or solar systems. By the same principle, the release of energy necessary for the star to find a new equilibrium through its decay always entails the release of gravity. Unwanted quantities of matter and energy are released, as well as the creation of subcomponents that still retain their magnetic forces. This disintegration of the initial fundamental plasma is discussed in greater detail in Chapter 15. Chapter Plasma Matter and its Transition of States. There is conclusive evidence that plasma possesses energy and maintains specific magnetic behavior, and that it can generate, and in fact does generate, its own magnetic fields and gravitational forces. Research conducted by various institutes around the world indicates that matter plasma is accompanied by a second constituent of matter called antimatter. Some institutes claim to have separated and contained antimatter. In other areas of science, scientists refer to what is called dark matter and to observations of virtual matter. Science has not considered the creation of these three states of matter, antimatter, and dark matter as constituents, nor as part of a single process within the initial progressive chain of creation of the three substances and as the content of a single plasma in the universe. This failure has stemmed from a lack of understanding that matter, antimatter, and dark matter, components of plasma, are created simultaneously as an integrated, dynamic, plasmatic magnetic entity. It is crucial to understand that none of these substances exists independently of the others within the overall structure of plasma. It is now possible to apply this new understanding of how plasmas are created and function to the creation and functioning of larger celestial objects in their environment. In other words, we apply our knowledge of how electrons function around the nucleus to how planets function around their stars. To better understand the relationship and structure of plasma, this book strives to analyze, step by step, how plasma matter is considered to be connected and how it appears to transition from one state of matter to another in different environments without any loss or gain in the intensity of its plasma magnetic fields. In the material world, this resembles the exchange between states of matter from solid to liquid, from liquid to gas, and vice versa. While in the material world the state of matter depends on the strength of magnetic fields, in plasma, it depends on the intensity of those fields. The phenomenon of transitioning from one state of matter to another is a regular occurrence in the dynamic processes of the universe. All components of plasma matter, or any matter in the universe, are connected to each other through the interaction of their morphological properties and the intensity of these properties, which constitute and create their magnitudes. Thus, as each substance gains or loses some of its morphological properties, a component of matter in the plasma becomes, or can become, a component of other matter in another plasma or field at a given point in morphological motion, time, and at a given point in space. Transmutation by environment. All matter can manifest as different matter simply through changes in the morphological intensity of the environment. For example, the same plasma or matter can transform upon passing through a region with a different morphological intensity. This process is called transmutation, but in this case, the transmutation occurs due to environmental conditions and not due to a change in the internal morphological intensity of the matter. Dark matter to virtual matter. Dark matter can appear as matter simply upon entering a new plasmonic environment. This is how dark matter suddenly appears as virtual matter, from dark matter to virtual matter. I call this phase the transmutation of matter, that is, the appearance of a new state of matter from the same original matter, but with a different appearance. State change by intensity transfer. Matter can change its state and behavior, for example, from dark matter to antimatter or matter, simply by transferring or giving up part of the intensity of its plasma magnetic fields to other matter or particles depending on its environment. If the intensity of the antimatter's magnetic fields reaches a level in the surrounding particles such that its total intensity equals and balances with that of its new environment, then the antimatter can become dark matter and behave as such in its new environment, Figure 22. On the other hand, for example, as the plasmonic intensity of the antimatter components decreases, or when antimatter interacts with other antimatter of different magnetic field intensity, these antimatter particles lose enough magnetic field intensity for one or both to become dark matter. Antimatter reaches a new equilibrium in the intensity of its plasma magnetic fields. Since this equilibrium can occur in both its internal and external magnetic fields, the magnetic field intensity of this antimatter can reach a level where the new intensity of the original antimatter equals the plasmonic intensity of matter, or change to the intensity level of the dark matter field under the same environmental conditions. Let's redefine elementary particles. Quarks. These are no longer considered elementary particles. They are, in fact, groupings and subcomponents of plasma magnetic fields and their interactions. Mass, spin, and color. These are explained by the interactions of magnetic fields. Mass, produced by the interaction of plasma fields through the principle of gravity. Spin. This is the natural dynamic motion of matter created by magnetic positioning within the plasma environment. Color of quarks represents the different intensities of the interacting plasma magnetic fields that give rise to gravity and global magnetism. New elementary particle. The true origin of elementary particles is the magnetic field itself. Very good. Let's continue with more processes. The principle of nuclear, universal, decay. The process of decay of the initial fundamental plasma is the universal principle that explains the creation of the atom and atomic decay. Imbalance occurs when the balance of the plasma's magnetic fields is disrupted. For example, the fields in the transition zones are depleted. Division. The initial fundamental plasma, for example, a primordial neutron or a massive star, divides to find a new equilibrium within its own matter. Atomic result. Decay leads to the creation of two new, smaller, and balanced plasmas. A larger plasma with more matter, proton, and a smaller plasma with less matter, electron. Energy release. During this rebalancing and repositioning, unwanted residual magnetic fields or particles are released in the form of beams, particles, or packets of sound energy. Universal analogy. This plasma-level process is analogous to the collapse of stars and galaxies, where the star disintegrates and reappears as new, smaller star systems, releasing vast amounts of energy in the process. The Keshe principle of matter transition states that the intensity of the plasma magnetic fields of the environment in which matter operates determines its appearance or presentation in that environment. Or, in other words, when matter gains or loses sufficient intensity in its plasma magnetic fields for its state, characteristics, or behavior to resemble those of other matter in the same environment. Therefore, matter can transform from one state to another by increasing or decreasing its plasmonic intensity, or it can manifest as different matter upon entering a different environment and plasma intensity conditions. That is, matter can acquire the characteristics of dark matter in an environment with a certain plasmonic intensity, and, likewise, antimatter can lose enough plasmonic intensity to become matter, and so on. Keshe's universal model of plasma transition of plasma magnetic fields and matter. Using simple plasmonic plasma dilution reactors, developed by the Keshe Foundation through its Keshe Technology Development Sector, the principle of matter transition has been verified, and the results have proven consistent with theoretical considerations. In these nuclear reactors, matter can transition from one state to another and then return to its original state. This new method of matter transition opens the door to a new form and technology for fulfilling all of humanity's material needs in terms of movement, energy, creation of new matter, and so on. For example, the effects and properties of matter transition can be used to make physical matter lack the magnetospheric boundary, as occurs with dark matter in a given environment, so that it behaves like dark matter. In these environments, matter will become translucent, or its central core will behave as if it were invisible to the surrounding environment, without any change in its physical properties, the intensity of its gravitational field, or its position in space. Since matter with this property does not exhibit an effective magnetospheric condition with respect to its environment due to the lack or minimal interaction between the matter particles and their surroundings, then matter can now behave as dark matter and move frictionlessly and freely within the same environment. Utilizing this state of dark matter effects around an aircraft or spacecraft will provide the craft with frictionless movement, higher speeds, and possible invisibility in space. In the same environment, matter transition technology has been tested for years by the Keshe Foundation. Various systems were designed, developed, manufactured, and used to achieve the formation of original magnetic field plasmas and demonstrate the validity of these principles. In fact, the veracity of the matter transition effect was verified. The implications and applications of matter transitions are so immense and profound that it is essential to know, for example, where matter will end up and in what state it will be found relative to its surroundings. That is, we need to know, for instance, when transitioning from matter to antimatter, at what point in the antimatter's magnetic field it will end. And conversely, when transitioning from dark matter to a region of matter, we need to know in what state of matter, gaseous, solid, or liquid, it will end up. Through the operation and control of these reactors, it is necessary to know the final state of matter and the magnetic conditions of the system. This could mean liquid seas, solid matter, or deserts. Without being prepared for these parameters through the operation of systems that facilitate such transitions, the use of matter transitions can have catastrophic consequences, not only for the system that produces them, but also for the occupants of any spacecraft that might use this type of transport in the universe. By understanding the principles of the creation of initial fundamental matter within the initial fundamental plasma, through the interaction of initial fundamental particles, several unresolved questions in the world of science can be answered. For example, in the universe, the total number of plasma magnetic fields and their associated energies are considered constant. Therefore, in the entirety of the universe, matter, magnetic fields, or matter itself are never lost or gained. Plasma particles of varying intensity begin existing at a certain intensity level and consolidate to increase their strength, or lose field intensity through division and collision, weakening. However, plasma particles, at their different field intensities, can never be destroyed or lost. Therefore, plasma particles simply interact, divide, and entangle to produce different types of matter and conditions, such as forces, motions, heat, and density, which allow matter to be visible to living beings, depending on their position, and so on. Plasma particles, when interacting with others of their own nature, can only transition from one state of matter to another depending on the conditions prevailing at a given point in time and space. Thus, matter can transition from dark matter to antimatter and vice versa, and matter to dark matter and vice versa, and so on. Therefore, the theory and discussion that the universe will one day run out of matter and energy, and then there will be nothing, as some scientists have recently promoted, is not at all a fallacy. In principle, we call the energy of plasma particles the energy of moving plasma particles. These moving plasma particles can release and give rise to the creation of the same matter from which they originated, and they can have the same capacity. That is, for example, the energy of dark matter can be transformed into matter energy or into a part of matter, and the same applies to other states of matter. By understanding the principles of the universal order of matter creation, we can harness the transition of states of matter to get the most out of universal matter, its dynamics, and energies. Through the constant interaction of all dynamics of varying intensities, the universe will be eternal as it moves through the interactions and repulsions of its fields of different intensities. This will give rise to the perpetual motion of universal dimensional forces and the creation of new matter, forces, and new conditions for them to cooperate within the universe. Therefore, there has never been a Big Bang, nor will there ever be an apocalyptic scenario for the universe as a whole. The universe will always remain in equilibrium within its universal dimensional order. The dynamics of matter will transition from one state of matter, dark matter, and antimatter, to another, and also from one state of matter, solid, liquid, gas, to another. These changes will depend on the properties and forces of the plasma magnetograph states and their relative intensity. Similarly, the mass plasmons of matter fields will transition to plasmons of different intensities, releasing dynamic plasmons in the form of energy during these transition processes. The true size of the universe will never be known. The universe cannot expand into a space that did not initially exist. From our perspective, we only observe a tiny fraction of the whole, and we see that fraction expanding. The observed expansion is relative to the observer's position with respect to a given position in the universe. For example, what appears as a redshift to an observer at one end of the universe will appear as a blue shift to an observer in the opposite direction of the same entity's motion. The article titled Creation of Magnetic Fields explains that the blue shift of light occurs when magnetic fields are compressed, and the redshift occurs when magnetic fields are moved apart or expanded. In the universal order of creation, there is no place for the principle of singularity, except, for example, in a single, massive magnetic field that covers the entire universe. In that case, all that has happened is that the original, single plasma has gradually disintegrated into smaller, weaker fields, whose interaction has given rise to the creation of what has been seen and exists in the present during the brief span of human life on Earth. This original singular plasma, which covered the entire universe, had to gradually disintegrate into fields of lesser intensity, whose interactions have given rise to the creation of all events, matter, and matter in the universe. The transition of the principles of the state of matter will be discussed in detail in future publications. Defining energy through physics. The initial components and structure of plasma are due to the existence of initial dynamic plasma magnetic fields. For a magnetic field to be detected or its existence to be confirmed, physics must transcend the limits of its containment, that is, the limits of the magnetic fields of matter or plasma. It is important to note that plasma magnetic fields, PM, do not possess or exhibit field strength unless they are in motion. The energy of a plasma can be defined as the sum of the strengths of the plasma magnetic fields of all its constituent matter and the moving fields, with respect to the plasma's original position in a complete 360-degree spherical direction. This is an important factor, since until now scientists have only measured and calculated the energy of the matter that makes up the plasma. To calculate the actual energy of the plasma, it is necessary to calculate the energy of all matter, antimatter, and dark matter, and the other components of the dynamic plasma. When the magnetic field extends beyond the boundaries of matter or plasma, its existence and the intensity of the released magnetic fields can be confirmed as energy. The plasma structures of individual plasma particles do not represent energy relative to other particles while they are within the boundaries of the plasma's magnetic forces. These magnetic fields are shown within the matter on the left of the image, but these are only forces, similar to those of a magnetic or gravitational field, with respect to other matter and particles. When the field leaves the environment of its matter or plasma, it can release its particles into other plasmas in regions or combinations of fields where interaction zones occur. These are shown as A-field forces at the plasma boundary. As plasma magnetic fields move away from the boundary of their original plasma, they use their energy to overcome other magnetic fields in their environment. Therefore, the farther they move from their parent plasma, the less energy they have to transfer to other plasmas upon contact with their particles. Thus, energy is transferred from one matter to another through the intensity of a particle and the magnitude of the particle present at the point of contact with the second matter. This is measured by the position and distance dependent, from the starting point to the arrival point. Schematic representation of the relationship between mass and energy with respect to matter. The total energy released by matter or plasma is the sum of the magnetic forces that the plasma can release and transfer and the proportion of mass that can be absorbed by all the components of other plasmas in its environment. That is, the same proportion of magnetic fields generated by matter, antimatter, dark matter, and other fields of the plasma is released, and the same proportion of all energy fields is transferred to all receiving plasmas and matter. The total energy of matter is said to be the total mass that Plasma can release energy by separating all the components from their initial fundamental magnetic fields, or what are known as their initial fundamental particles, from which the plasma and the matter that compose it were formed at the moment of their creation. Thus, the energy released by the plasma, or the total energy it possesses, is actually the sum total of the initial fundamental magnetic fields of all its components, which separate from matter and are in motion as they interact with other plasma components. The plasma particles absorbed by some plasmas may be only a portion of the total moving plasma particles or energies released by the initial ground plasma, and are not necessarily considered the total energy that a plasma possessed or has released. The energy released by a plasma is said to be the sum total of the initial ground plasma particles released by all the components of that plasma upon crossing its magnetic boundary. Multiplasma atoms release more plasma magnetic fields due to the sum total of the plasma magnetic fields released by all the participating plasmas, protons, neutrons, and electrons. The principles of maggrav force creation allow us to understand that energy can be simply defined as a quantity that, once released through the characteristic dynamic boundary of magravs from plasma or matter, can exert or transmit part of its energy to another plasma, so that the new matter or plasma maintains its existence and or maintains a constant normal magnetic field intensity and or increases its magnetic density to levels of the same magnetism intensity as its baseline levels in its given environment. Mass measurement. One of the main unresolved questions in the world of physics is how the mass of matter is created and how it can be calculated. According to Keshe's theory of mass, the creation and measurement of an entity's mass are defined as follows. Due to the interaction of at least two magnetic rays, magnetic fields, or plasma magnetic fields, the result of such interaction generates two field forces, an attractive force called gravitational force and a repulsive force called magnetic force. The interaction of these gravitational and magnetic forces leads to an equilibrium between them, where the difference in intensity of the magnetic fields resulting from the interaction of the gravitational and magnetic forces is the measure of the mass of the entity created by the two original magnetic fields. The result of this field equilibrium is the creation of the mass of matter, the components of plasma, or the mass of matter, solid, liquid, or gas. In other words, according to Keshe's law for measuring the mass of any entity, matter, plasma, atom, planet, star, etc., it is established that mass of any entity equals measure of the total intensity of the entity's gravitational fields, measure of the total intensity of the entity's magnetic fields. Through this definition and understanding, it becomes clear that gravitational field forces always predominate and are stronger, since all the entities possess mass. Otherwise, their mass would be negative. Therefore, mass is the measure of the difference between two or more magnetic fields after their interaction, not the measure of their intensity before the interaction. The measure of magnetic fields before interaction is their respective intensities, and after interaction, the resulting equilibrium between the generated gravitational and magnetic fields becomes the mass relative to a given fixed position of the central magnetic field. The creation of magnetospheres is always accompanied by the creation of a magnetosphere and the creation of the mass of any entity in the universe, and these four forces are created instantaneously and simultaneously. Magnetic fields, gravitational fields, magnetospheric field, mass field. These four fundamental initial forces of an entity's existence result from the interaction and entanglement of two or more magnetic fields or plasma magnetic fields of similar intensity, regardless of the entity's size, whether it is matter, an atom, or a star. Therefore, the mass of any object, created by two magnetic fields of similar intensity, is independent of any external force or factor, such as the gravitational fields of other objects or entities. The moment the two magnetic fields intertwine to generate the initial gravitational fields of an entity, a magnetosphere is produced. At that moment, the extent of the magravs of the two magnetic fields involved in the original fields no longer behaves as individual fields, but becomes an independent entity with respect to the magnetic fields of its surroundings. Therefore, the mass of any entity, such as matter, is constant and independent of the ambient magravs in which it exists and operates. This is why the mass of future spacecraft, or the mass of planets like Earth, is independent of their environmental conditions. In other words, the intensity of the interaction of the two original magnetic fields and the extent of the fields they produce, which created the magravs, determine how much mass the interaction of the two fields will carry, and no other factor. This is why humans can construct ships capable of transporting any payload using Grappo's nuclear reactors and the power of magravs. The payload of these systems and the intensity of the magravs they generate create independent ambient magrav forces, provided the Grappo's magnetosphere boundary covers the physical boundary of these ships. Therefore, the two magnetic fields must have the same intensity to create the four initial field forces. If two magnetic fields of unequal intensity interact, they create the gravitational field, the magnetic field, the magnetosphere, and mass, with the lower intensity field determining the maximum intensity level of the four fields that matter can possess. The more intense magnetic field residues from these encounters and the creation of matter with unequal magnetic fields become the entity's residual magnetic field. And this tail is the cause of the curling effect of this type of mass. When two magnetic fields of unequal intensity cannot create mass, the interaction itself produces a curling of both fields, a phenomenon known as magnetic field curl. This effect is partly responsible for the swirling of toroidal F1 field regions in plasmas, and its larger-scale counterpart, the rotation of wormholes, since these regions of the universe are created from interactions and entanglements of unbalanced magnetic field intensities, both in the plasma and in the universe. In many ways, by knowing the intensity of two magnetic beams, magnetic fields, plasma magnetic fields, etc., that are about to interact and create the initial magnetic and gravitational fields of an entity, one can predict the resulting mass of that entity. Einstein related the mass of matter to its energy through the general equation of relativity. As explained earlier, the mass of an atom or plasma is composed of the density of particles and their interaction. Thus, initial fundamental plasmas always have the same mass, regardless of the magnetic fields of their surroundings. Similarly, atoms of the same elements are always composed of the same number of subcomponents of the initial plasma magnetic field: neutrons, protons, and electrons. Atoms of the same elements always experience the same total attraction and repulsion from plasma gravitational magnetic fields with respect to all their internal components, regardless of the surrounding plasma magnetic fields. Train. This constitutes the total mass of an atom, since mass is an expression of the measure of the total plasmonic interaction confined within the plasma fields. Considering the general equation of relativity, the energy of the mass of matter in the plasma will therefore be the total energy released by the matter of the plasma, once it has left its boundaries, is equal to the total energy balance of the plasma's constituent matter components, mass, multiplied by the square of the maximum speed that this energy can reach in the material environment, the speed of light. Considering this, energy of different intensities can travel different distances from its point of release at different speeds in different types of matter and media. Therefore, it is correct to state that the energy of matter, once it has left the plasma magravs, will travel at a different speed than the speed of the plasma magnetic fields of the antimatter of the same plasma, or of the dark matter of the same plasma, in the material environment. Antimatter has and is composed of different pyrotechnic intensities because it was initially created by more intense fields. Therefore, its speed will be different and greater than that of matter. That makes it up in the same plasma and environment. According to the same principle, the faster-moving field of antimatter carries more energy, or more powerful energies, than the slower-moving particles of the matter that makes up the plasma. Conversely, since antimatter possesses more power or energy than matter, then, for the same volume of antimatter as matter in the plasma, the antimatter particles must move faster than the matter particles in the material medium. The Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, Fermilab, in the USA, believes that a small amount of antimatter, once released from the matter of the plasma, can provide more energy than the matter that makes up the same plasma. They are considering and working on this principle. They can burn the antimatter to release its energy, so that, when the antimatter reaches the energy state of matter, they can harness its excess energy. Through the Keshe principle of energy conversion, the fundamental principle of universal conversion states that the dynamic properties of matter, like antimatter, matter slows down when it interacts with other magnetic fields, so its energy can be absorbed and converted to dynamic intensity levels characteristic of matter. These levels become usable in the material environment and manifest as matter, solid, liquid, and gas. Following the same principle, matter can be converted into antimatter by the same method, but in reverse. These processes do not differ substantially in either conversion. Only the state of the plasmonic intensity and the effects of the environment, which predominate at a given point and position of motion, time, will determine the dynamic plasmonic state in which matter manifests, and what matter will appear in the field of view of the detection instruments available at a given point in the universe. This determines whether the plasmonic intensity will manifest as a solid, liquid, or gaseous state, or whether it will manifest as one of the states of matter, dark matter, or antimatter. Chapter 6: The Plasma's Total Energy Balance Equation. The energy balance equation, or general equation of relativity, E equals mc squared, establishes the relationship between the tangible matter of the plasma and its constituent energy. The mass of an atom or a collection of plasmas of its components is made up of a set of plasmon intensity densities of different matter and their interactions with each other within their respective initial fundamental plasma. Schematic of the fields of all components and of the initial fundamental plasma. When considering the plasma, the general equation of relativity can be written in real terms of its constituent components, their interactions, and their effects. Thus, this equation, as mentioned, can be defined with respect to the matter components of the plasma as follows. The total energy released by the moving matter of the plasma, once it has left the plasma boundary, is equal to the total mass balance, after the interaction, of the mass of the matter components of the plasma, multiplied by the square of the maximum speed that the particles can reach in the matter environment, speed of light. Knowing the new composition of the plasma, the total energy of the plasma must be the sum of the masses of all its matter, and not just of its matter component. Therefore, K, the total plasma energy, equals matter energy plus antimatter energy, plus dark matter energy, plus energy of the spherical toroidal field force, plus energy of interactions between other parts in the plasma transition zones. Where the general equation of relativity for all plasma components can be written as follows. K equals square of the particle velocity in the matter medium plus square of the particle velocity in the antimatter medium plus square of the particle velocity in the dark matter medium plus energy of the central spherical toroidal field plus energy within the transition zones. Since Fermilab has separated the antimatter components from the plasma, one might ask whether the mass of matter in the plasma remains the same as before, without the antimatter. What, then, is the mass or weight of the antimatter that has been separated? This also applies to the dark matter components of the initial ground plasma. As previously stated, the total weight or mass of the plasma is, and must be, the total weight and mass of all the plasma's matter components. This includes the masses or energies of the magnetic field strengths of the F1 and the residual fields in the initial ground plasma. Therefore, there is a fundamental error in current methods and technologies for measuring the weight and mass of plasma systems as a whole. This is why strange results are suddenly observed in the antimatter component of the plasma, which has the same mass or weight as the material environment. If the overall dynamics of the initial ground plasma had been measured correctly from the beginning, such ambiguity and mystery surrounding the hidden energy sources called antimatter or dark matter in the plasma would not have arisen. The fact is that antimatter and dark matter possess plasma magnetic forces and are therefore called matter, since they possess mass and energy. Therefore, if a gravitational field force exists from the antimatter or dark matter components of the plasma, then this antimatter and dark matter must have mass and weight relative to the other matter in the plasma and the surrounding particles at any given time. Consequently, it is necessary to measure both the mass and weight of the plasma as a whole, as well as the individual masses of each matter component. This is similar to measuring the atomic mass and weight of an atom. The definition of energy and total plasma mass. Current physics has mismeasured energy because it is focused only on the matter of a plasma. A plasma, such as a proton or neutron, is a single entity containing matter, antimatter, and dark matter. Therefore, to calculate the actual energy of any entity, from an atom to a galaxy, the energy of all its components must be added together. A magnetic field has no force unless it is in motion. Energy is simply the moving plasma magnetic field that crosses the boundary of its original plasma, interacting with other fields. Mass is created by the interaction of at least two magnetic fields that generate gravitational force, attraction, and magnetic force, repulsion. The true measure of mass is the difference between these two forces. Keshe's law of mass states that gravitational force always predominates, That is why mass exists. In the future, scientists must understand and apply my equation for the total energy balance of plasma. K equals square of the particle velocity in the matter medium plus square of the particle velocity in the antimatter medium plus square of the particle velocity in the dark matter medium plus energy of the central spherical toroidal field plus energy within the transition zones. Transition and space navigation. Matter can transform into antimatter or dark matter, and vice versa, simply by gaining or losing intensity in its plasma magnetic fields. This is the normal transition of matter. We have tested this with our reactors. By manipulating plasma intensity, we can make physical matter behave like dark matter, becoming translucent and invisible by losing its magnetospheric boundary. This is the principle behind the Grappos reactors we developed. The use of a Grappos reactor in a spacecraft provides it with its own independent magnetosphere, making the ship's mass constant and independent of surrounding gravity, allowing for frictionless movement and higher speeds. However, for future travelers, a small miscalculation in measuring these plasma components could lead the ship into strange and unexpected galactic environments, or even cause parts of the system to experience matter conditions completely different from the rest of the structure. Accuracy in handling magnetic matter, is crucial for space safety. Light and the true speed of the universe. The assumption that the speed of light is the maximum speed of everything that exists is a conceptual flaw. Visible light is created by the collision and friction of two faster and more powerful plasma magnetic fields, e.g., the fields of the Sun and Earth. Light is, in fact, a slowed-down remnant of these original fields. A slowed-down remnant cannot be faster than the fields that created it. Conclusion: the speed of light is at the lower end of the spectrum of speeds of universal magnetic fields. The light we see during the day is the result of the interaction of our Earth's magnetic field with the Sun's more intense fields. The dim light and darkness of night are the result of the interaction of our Earth's field with the weaker fields of dark matter in space. The speed of light is simply the maximum speed that particles in the matter components of a plasma can reach, but it does not apply to the fields of antimatter or dark matter, which have different and often higher speeds. These faster fields and their effects have already been observed in our lift and propulsion reactors. The false limitation of the speed of light. My friends, the limitation of the propagation speed of fields to the speed of light is a restriction that humanity has imposed upon itself due to its ignorance of the true structure of the universe. It is as absurd as believing that the Earth is flat. The intensity and speed of plasma magnetic fields are limitless. Visible light is only the range we can see because our own protein molecular chains have adapted to interact with and recognize that specific magnetic wavelength. If our proteins had a different chemical composition, we would see the universe in a completely different magnetic field intensity range. Grappos technology and light control. We have demonstrated this with our gravitational positioning systems, Grappos. Using Grappos reactors, spacecraft interact with the plasma fields of Earth's atmosphere. This interaction generates light around the spacecraft, similar to the brightness of stars, due to the difference in intensity between the reactor's maggrav field and Earth's. But the real science is control. Bright light occurs when the Grappos field and Earth's field have a large difference in intensity. Invisibility. Dark light achieved by using Grappos to create a magnetic field intensity that is balanced with Earth's atmospheric field. With no interaction or significant friction, little to no light is created. The ship becomes translucent, giving the impression that it has vanished. By controlling the Grappos reactor, humans will be able to travel several times faster than the speed of light, a feat that will soon be as routine as atmospheric flight is today. Dark light, the lost balance. The phenomenon of dark light is the counterpart to visible light. While visible light is created by the difference in intensity of colliding fields, dark light is the result of the interaction of and balanced intensity magnetic fields. Definition: dark light is due to a near-perfect balance in the plasmonic strength of interacting fields. Intensity of darkness. The level of this darkness does not depend on the individual strength of the fields, but on the balance between them. If the strength of two plasmonic fields is nearly equal, the phenomenon of darkness prevails, regardless of how powerful the original fields were. By understanding this phenomenon, We can develop tools that visualize this balance of plasmonic strength, revealing a universe teeming with new and invisible objects that humanity has never been able to contemplate. It is a wondrous world awaiting those with vision. Chapter 9. The primordial interaction between gravity and light. My dear ones, the connection between gravity and light is inescapable because both are composed of the same fundamental entity, plasma magnetic fields, pyrotechnics. Light is nothing more than dynamic pyrotechnics of a lower order in motion. Classical error. Classical physics says that light bends due to gravity. False. My principle. Light bends and moves due to the attraction and interaction of its own weaker magnetic fields with the stronger magnetic fields of another entity, such as a star or dark matter. Positional dependence. The attraction of light does not depend on gravity as a separate force, but on its position within the magnetic gravitational field of another entity. The stronger the maggrav of the object, star, antimatter, dark matter, the stronger the attraction and the slower the light travels. Black holes and the curvature of space-time. The supposed bending of light, gravitational lensing, near stars is due exclusively to the interaction of the light's magnetic field with the star's plasma field. Black holes and the curvature of space-time. The supposed bending of light, gravitational lensing, near stars is due exclusively to the interaction of the light's magnetic field with the star's plasma field. Black holes. Light is absorbed by black holes not for some mysterious reason, but because the intensity of their magnetic field at the center is so strong that it gravitationally attracts the much weaker magnetic fields of light inward. Einstein's refutation. Gravity and its intensity do not depend on, nor are they caused by, the curvature of spacetime. Curvature is merely an indicator of the path of attraction from a weaker gravitational field to a stronger one. Light and time. The speed at which a beam of light is attracted by a gravitational field depends on the intensity of the gravitational field, not on time. Multiple frames of reference. Since the speed of light varies in environments of matter, antimatter, and dark matter, there must be different frames of reference for time in the universe. Particle transition. When a light plasmon comes into contact with another field, it is not only attracted but also merges and becomes part of the receiving gravitational field, creating a new magnetic system. Final notes on frequency. The frequency of a light wave is created by the same principle as the polarity reversal of stars, such as the sun. The alteration of the maximum and minimum points of the waves depends on the positional equilibrium of the magravs, not on the electromagnetic field, since the electrons themselves are composed of plasma magnetic fields. Chapter 10. Antimatter. My friends, antimatter is the main component of plasma and the one that concentrates the greatest power and quality of dynamic energy. Center of gravity. Antimatter is the star or gravitational center of all plasma, similar to the sun in a solar system. It concentrates the most intense magnetic fields. Technology and gravity. The presence of intense antimatter fields is the primary reason we have been able to lift and move large masses in our reactors, generating the maggrav forces necessary for gravitational positioning. It's not fuel. Antimatter does not need to be burned as fuel. It is enough to learn how to use the interaction of its fields with other plasmas or matter to create energy and motion, just as happens in the universe. The key is to separate it from the plasma smoothly, for example, through dilution, not collision. Chapter 11. The energy of antimatter. Antimatter is the source of the strongest plasmonic particles. Particle release. Antimatter releases particles with a more intense and broader spectrum of magnetic fields. These particles, energies, escape the gravitational fields of antimatter because they experience a decrease in force, allowing them to travel very far. Superior strength. The energies released by antimatter are more powerful and span a wider spectrum of energy levels, simply because they originate from a stronger particle base in the initial plasma. Range. Because they originate from stronger fields. That is, its plasmonic particles extend further, transferring their energy to other particles in their surroundings, affecting a larger domain. Chapter 12. Dark energy. Dark energy is the result of the interaction of balanced fields. Darkness is equilibrium. Dark energy is the set of dynamic forces that are in equilibrium or near equilibrium with the intensity of their surroundings. It is not the absence of energy, The darkness of the universe does not mean that there are no moving magnetic fields, energy. In fact, it confirms the existence of magnetic fields with balanced intensity. Creation of darkness. Light is produced by the difference in intensity of fields. Therefore, when two areas of fields with equal magnetic intensity collide, no fragments of visible light are generated, creating a transient dark area. Definition: dark energy is energy in motion, morphological forces, but it is in a balanced or near-balanced state with its surroundings. That is why the universe is perceived as mostly dark. It is in a state of pyroclastic intensity equilibrium. See Chapter 13, Dark Matter. Definition and composition. My friends, dark matter, G3, is a fundamental component of plasma that possesses psi-magnetic forces to maintain its own fields. Essential for existence, dark matter is the center of gravity of plasma and acts as a bridge between the stronger fields, antimatter, and the weaker ones, matter. Without a large mass of dark matter, matter and antimatter cannot manifest. Darkness is equilibrium. Dark matter is dark because the magnetosphere it creates, through the interaction of its forces with the environment, is in a state of perfect equilibrium of plasmonic intensity. This balanced interaction does not create residual fragments of light in the visible spectrum, making this matter undetectable by our light-based systems. Black holes. The largest entities of dark matter are black holes, where an intense gravitational force is observed without a visible physical source, a result of this same field equilibrium. Dark matter control and space travel. Understanding dark matter allows for extraordinary technologies. Frictionless travel. By using Grappo's reactors to generate a balanced magnetic field around the spacecraft, creating the dark matter effect, friction and resistance are eliminated. This allows for speeds far exceeding the speed of light. Invisibility. The same principle of magnetic equilibrium can be used to create systems that, without moving, become invisible to the naked eye, both in the atmosphere and in space. Appearance and state of dark matter. Conditional visibility. Dark matter is not static. It can become visible when there is a change in the intensity of the particles in its environment or a change in its own internal intensity. It is like water on a cloth. The water is always there, but it only manifests as droplets when conditions change by wringing the cloth. Sunspots. The dark spots on the sun are due to this same principle. They are regions where the magnetic fields of the solar core and the plasma fields of the surface reach an equilibrium of intensity during polarity reversal cycles, preventing the creation of light. Filling space. Like gases, dark matter and dark energy lack self-containment and fill all available space, covering the space between different matter in atomic structure, solar systems, and galaxies, the principle of pi-metric magnitude. The universe is dark, not empty. The universe appears dark and empty because it is covered with dark matter and dark energy that are in equilibrium. These are the translucent dark energy zones, which are transparent through their morphological energies, confirming that dark space is balanced in particle intensity, not devoid of them. Chapter 14, Particles and Virtual Matter. Virtual particles are real matter. My friends, the so-called virtual particles that appear out of nowhere are, in fact, real matter or individual nanoatoms that behave exactly like dark matter. Chapter 13. Appearance. These particles always exist in the universal soup of magnetic fields. They only become visible, appear, when they enter a new environment with a magnetic field intensity different from their previous equilibrium. Creation of light. Upon colliding with the new environment of different intensity, these particles create a new magnetosphere and release light, plasmonic fragments, due to the interaction of their plasmas, making them visible for a brief instant. This is how virtual particles are created. They are matter that manifests due to an environmental change. They are not something new. Doppler effect. The movement of these particles is the cause of the blue shift if they are approaching due to field compression, or redshift if they are moving away due to field expansion in the light spectrum they emit. The Casimir effect and antimatter. The Casimir effect, the appearance of photons or energy in the vacuum between two conductive plates, is a demonstration of my physics, even though scientists don't understand it. No total vacuum. Although a total vacuum is believed to exist, residual atoms, plasmas of electrons and protons, always remain between the plates. Greater freedom. By creating a vacuum, these residual atoms gain greater freedom of movement, and their magnetosphere expands. Mechanism: the remaining matter collides with the plate walls, releasing fragments with plasmonic intensity similar to that of photons. The Casimir effect is a useful tool for measuring the amount and type of matter remaining in space. Reactor tests: in my tests on plasma dilution reactors, we have measured significant voltages and currents, but never photons. This demonstrates that the energy that are in equilibrium. These are the translucent dark energy zones, which confirm that dark space is balanced in particle intensity, not devoid of them. Chapter 14. Virtual particles. The so-called virtual particles are, in fact, real matter or individual nanoatoms that behave like dark matter. Appearance is manifestation. These particles do not appear out of nowhere. They always exist. They only manifest, appear, when they enter a new environment with a different magnetic field intensity, breaking their previous equilibrium. In doing so, they release fragments of light and become visible for a brief instant. Casimir effect. The appearance of energy in the vacuum, Casimir effect, is due to the fact that the vacuum is never total. There are always residual atoms that, with greater freedom of movement, collide with the plates. My tests in reactors demonstrate that the measured energy comes from antimatter, not just from photons. Van der Waals forces. The forces of attraction and repulsion between molecules, van der Waals, are, in reality, the manifestation of magnetic and gravitational forces at the molecular level. Chapter 15. Summary of the Keshe model. Interaction between matter and fusion. The interaction between matter, antimatter, and dark matter is the key to universal creation. Matter-antimatter. When they collide, matter is absorbed by the greater intensity of the antimatter fields. There is no total annihilation, but rather a transformation where matter and its fields integrate into antimatter, following the law of conservation of energy. Matter-dark matter. Matter is absorbed by the gravitational center of dark matter. An imbalance in this process can cause dark matter to become visible. Origin of the hydrogen atom. The fundamental collision between antimatter and dark matter creates a giant, unstable plasma. The collapse and stabilization of this mixture gives rise to the initial fundamental atom, hydrogen, where the electron is the new mini-magnetic satellite orbiting the nucleus, proton. Interatomic fusion. The true fusion current fusion technology is inefficient. The natural method is interatomic fusion, fusing the electron plasma with the proton plasma within its own atom using plasma dilution reactors with mild magnetic fields, mimicking the universal process. Chapter 16. Summary of the Keshe model. Inertia versus gravity. It is fundamental to differentiate between surface force, inertia, and deep force, gravity. Gravity grabs the sum of all magnetic fields created by all components of the plasma, matter, antimatter, dark matter, of a dynamic object. It has a greater range and affects all matter in the plasma. Inertia. The movements and gravitational fields due only to matter in non-dynamic components, solids, liquids, gases. Its attraction is more selective and weaker. Monogravitational technology. Understanding inertia allows the creation of reactors, grazers, capable of attracting or repelling a single specific matter or element, such as CO2, by adjusting the field intensity. Communication. These systems allow information encapsulated in dark matter to be sent at speeds greater than that of light without resistance. Forced peace. The lethal potential of monomagrav technology necessitates an end to wars, as its use would result in the total annihilation of the human race, guaranteeing peace in the universe through fear. Chapter 17. Plasma and nuclear decay. My friends, the nuclear decay of a heavy atom follows the same principle as the simple decay of the initial fundamental plasma, the neutron. Initial fundamental plasma decay. This is the process by which the initial plasma, neutron, splits into two new structures of the same matter, a proton and an electron, releasing unwanted magnetic fields in the form of rays. This confirms that all initial plasmas are composed of the same specific entangled plasma magnetic fields, SEPMAFs. Nuclear fission. Heavy atoms fission is due to the rebalancing of the intensity of the atom's plasma magnetic fields. When a heavy atom consumes enough binding energy to hold its plasmas together, The remaining plasmas gravitationally reposition themselves to find a new equilibrium. The nucleus splits into two or more lighter, more stable atoms. Half-life and environment. The rate of atomic decay, half-life, is not random. It depends on the intensity of the magnetic potentials in the environment where the matter is located, which affects the rate of internal energy consumption of the atom. Therefore, the decay of an atom can be triggered by both internal changes and variations in external magnetic fields. Chapter 18. Model Overview. Neutron-proton, electron-atom. This chapter reveals the precise sequence of the atom's birth from the fundamental plasma, neutron. The neutron, foundation plasma. The neutron is an environment of dynamic and balanced plasma magnetic fields containing matter, antimatter, and dark matter, in addition to the F1 factor. Therefore, its mass is greater than the sum of the masses of the proton and the electron separated. Neutron decay. 8 steps decay begins with the separation of the strongest components, antimatter, followed by dark matter. As the equilibrium is disrupted, matter disintegrates, and the remaining morphological fragments fuse to produce a small, independent mini-plasma within the neutron. Birth of the electron. This mini-plasma, with its own magnetosphere, is the electron. Finally, it is ejected from the boundaries of the initial ground plasma, and the Markov gap, energy level, is established between it and the rest of the plasma, which is now the proton. Function of the neutron in heavy atoms. The neutron acts as a magnetic equalizer or spacer in complex nuclei. Its balanced plasma creates the space and volume necessary for the free movement and positioning of the multiple protons. Without enough neutrons, the magnetic repulsion of the protons could cause the nucleus to explode. Charge and electric flux. Negative charge is, in fact, the intensity of a field's gravitational attraction, and positive charge is the intensity of magnetic repulsion. Impedance measures the gravitational attraction of the plasma flow, negative charge, and resistance measures the magnetic repulsion of the flow, positive charge. Chapter 19. Electron motion around the proton. My friends, the electron's motion is not a fixed orbit. It is an erratic and uncertain motion caused by the constant dynamic Markov's positioning between the electron and the proton. The cause of motion. Both the proton and the electron are dynamic entities composed of matter, antimatter, and dark matter. As the less massive electron interacts with the proton's changing Markovs, it is continually attracted and repelled by the different components of matter within the proton. Markov's positioning. The electron must constantly find a new Markov's equilibrium position with respect to the changing proton forces. This repositioning. Continuous motion is the cause of the erratic trajectory we observe and defines the minimum and maximum distances of its movement. Universal method of motion. This principle, the dynamic Markov's positioning of one entity with respect to another, is the universal method of motion. The movement of electrons, planets, stars, and galaxies is based on the same principle. Future travel. It is not necessary to burn fuel to create motion. It is enough to generate the appropriate magnetic gravity intensity, Markovs, within a system for it to dynamically position itself with respect to the Markovs of a planet or star, achieving the movement of spacecraft or terrestrial vehicles. Chapter 20. Molecules. Molecular creation. A molecule or cell is only created and maintained when the magnetic and gravitational fields, Markovs, of all participating atoms are in a state of perfect equilibrium and positioning. The replication of matter. If the necessary plasma magnetic field conditions can be replicated and maintained, any known atom or molecule anywhere in the universe can be accurately reproduced. Van der Waals. Van der Waals forces of attraction and repulsion are simply the forces of gravitational and magnetic fields operating between different molecules. Industrial application. In future Markovs reactors, essential molecules such as hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen can be produced simply by absorbing plasma from the surrounding environment and replicating the Markovs of the desired molecules, facilitating the production of food and air for space travel. Chapter 21. Plasma dilution technology. Plasma dilution technology is the future of energy, materials production, and movement. Concept. It is a new approach to controlling plasma. Instead of forcing matter together with high temperature or pressure, a reactor is used to create a dilute plasma magnetic soup, with weak magnetic fields that match the plasma's cohesive forces. Controlled disassembly. This dilution weakens and opens the plasma's Coulomb barrier. This allows the plasma's components, matter, antimatter, dark matter, to separate and move freely, enabling their use and control for desired purposes. Revolutionary applications. Room temperature fusion enables soft nuclear fusion, intraatomic fusion, without uncontrolled heat. Antimatter extraction replaces particle accelerators by safely and controllably separating antimatter. Motion creation. The use of powerful dark matter magraphs, controlled by this technology, creates high-speed, frictionless motion for spacecraft. Zero waste. All processes are performed without emitting radiation, generating no radioactive waste or CO2, and can operate at ambient temperature in safe, portable reactors. Chapter 22. Matter and Magrav Systems. My friends, Magrav's positioning technology, GRAPOS, is the future of movement, as it utilizes the entire plasma, not just matter. Obsolete propulsion technology. Current systems, rockets, cars, burn fuel to combat the planet's magravs. They use the weakest part of the plasma, matter, and have limited energy, are inefficient, and generate waste. Magrav's technology, GRAPOS. These systems utilize the properties and interactions of matter, antimatter, and dark matter within the plasma. They operate within and through the universal magnetic field system to achieve movement without destroying matter. Light creation and UFOs. The interaction of the reactor's plasma magravs with the planets, or the sun's, plasma magravs generates natural light around the system, exactly as occurs in Earth's magnetosphere. This means that unidentified flying objects, UFOs, observed as bright lights in the atmosphere are simply craft using GRAPOS technology, and that humanity now understands its operating principle. Magnetospheric protection. GRAPOS reactors create a protective magnetosphere around the craft, just like Earth. This barrier protects against cosmic radiation and space debris. It also allows craft to pass through dense media, such as ice or cosmic dust, by temporarily diluting the matter of the medium at the plasma level. Summary of the Keshe model. Pymetric matter in reactors for lift and motion. Motion in the universe is an act of balancing fields, not brute force. Zero weight and lift. When operating multi-core dynamic GRAPOS reactors, magravs forces are generated which, upon reaching total equilibrium with the planet's magravs, achieve zero system weight. Repulsion principle, upward motion. Lift is due to the fact that the magnetic fields of the system and the planet have the same polarity, so they repel each other. This phenomenon is incorrectly called anti-gravity, since it is actually a balance between the gravitational, attraction, and magnetic, repulsion, forces of both systems. Creation of motion. Any subsequent change in the intensity of the reactor's magravs, modifying the relationship between the internal gravitational and magnetic fields, forces the system to seek a new equilibrium point with the planetary magravs. This continuous attempt at rebalancing is what causes motion. This is the universal method that governs the motion of electrons, planets, and galaxies. Internal gravity. GRAPOS reactors create and maintain an independent internal gravitational field within the spacecraft, allowing it to maintain a 1G Earth-like gravity, regardless of the spacecraft's position or speed in space. Conclusive evidence. My tests have demonstrated that a small reactor can support or augment the weight of much larger systems, confirming the validity of the magrav's positioning principle as the future of space exploration and transportation. Chapter 24. Passive magnetic fields. My friends, magnetic fields are divided into two types of interaction. Active magnetic fields. These fields are directed toward matter and are what cause movement, vibration, and heat. For example, they dislocate electrons or cause conductive materials to vibrate, as in electrical generators. Passive magnetic fields. These fields, produced mainly by the matter of the plasma, do not cause movement or vibration of electrons. Their function is energy transfer for re-equilibration. Equilibrium function. If a plasma needs a specific magnetic intensity to return to its baseline level, the passive field passing through it transfers the necessary energy. If it does not need it, it passes through without interacting. If the second plasma has a surplus, it transfers it to the first. Cellular nutrition. These passive fields are crucial for supplying energy, vitamins, and minerals to the atoms and molecules of protein chains in the human body. To obtain the full spectrum, we need to consume different minerals, vitamins, and proteins. Chapter 25: New Knowledge and New Technologies. New plasma knowledge radically simplifies the methods of nuclear physics and aerospace engineering. Simplified fusion and fission. Science no longer needs to forcefully collide atoms, fission, or use massive magnetic fields to force fusion. Plasma dilution technology offers a simpler, more practical, and energy-efficient way to achieve nuclear fission and fusion. Universal motion. The new Magrav's positioning reactors, GRAPOs, utilize the universal motion method, which is the same principle that governs the motion of an electron around a proton, the Earth's position relative to the Sun, and the movement of Ganymede, Jupiter's moon, within its planet's magnetosphere, a phenomenon that current science cannot explain. Chapter 26: Experimental Results and Observations. The objective of this chapter is to consolidate the experimental results obtained with SMA reactors and multi-core plasma dilution reactors, demonstrating the validity of the new theoretical principles, Magravs, plasma dilution, etc., proposed by Keshe. The phenomenon of fusion, Coulomb barrier. Current problem: science has invested billions without being able to overcome the Coulomb barrier for nuclear fusion, which is essentially the magnetic field of the plasma. Keshe's solution: the solution is not to force the passage of the barrier, but to create an environment within the reactor whose magnetic field intensity is similar to that of the plasma. Principle: by matching the magnetic field strength of the reactor with that of the plasma, the barrier opens without resistance, radically simplifying plasma fusion or the use of Magravs from plasma matter. Lift and movement. Levitation tests demonstrated the reactor's ability to generate controlled lift and movement and weight reduction. Movement observations. The reactors, weighing several kilograms, up to 15 kilograms, achieved lift and lateral movement without propellers, pneumatic systems, solid magnets, electromagnets, or aerodynamic design. The movement was confirmed by independent experts. In one test, control was lost, and it was necessary to manually catch the reactor in midair. In dual reactor configurations, both repulsion, one reactor moved away from the stronger field, and attraction, one reactor was drawn toward the stronger field, were observed, demonstrating the controlled interaction of the Magravs. Weight reduction, anti-gravity, a reduction of controlled weight reduction of several kilograms, even down to a zero reading on the scale, using less than 1/1000th of a gram of material, or simply by adjusting internal parameters. This is not due to anti-gravity in its traditional sense, but to a new equilibrium in the Magravs forces between the reactor system and the Earth's dynamic plasma Magravs. The reduction or increase in weight is due to the interaction of the planet's Magravs with the new, strong plasma magnets generated in the reactor cores, which originate from the interaction of the antimatter fields of the dissociated plasma. Nuclear and energy phenomena. Unusual magnetic radiation. During a specific test in 2008, detectors registered high levels of magnetic field radiation at distances greater than 1.5 meters from the reactor. It was concluded that this radiation was due to the release of trapped magnetic fields from the plasma that the system was configured to produce, something inexplicable by known physics in the absence of neutron sources. Spontaneous shutdown and restart. In numerous tests, upon reaching the equilibrium state of the internal Magravs between the cores, the entire system shut down, sometimes for 30 minutes or more. Attempts to restart with large amounts of external energy were futile, demonstrating that the energy generated by the small amount of matter was too powerful to be countered by additional energy. Matter production and future technology. Material production. The creation of a new orange and gold-colored material was observed on 2 occasions. It is claimed that the technology can produce oxygen, hydrogen, and water from fundamental particles, plasma, absorbed from space, using controlled gravitational fields to reorganize the plasma into the desired elements. Space travel and habitability. 1G. The technology allows for the creation of different gravitational conditions within and around spacecraft. It is possible to create a gravitational field force of 1G, similar to Earth's, for normal human habitability inside spacecraft, while external conditions can vary from 0G to tens of G. Dark matter technology, undetectable travel. The use of the dark matter, G3, principle for transportation allows a spacecraft to generate no interface magnetosphere or friction with the planetary system. By emitting no visible light, the spacecraft can travel in intense planetary fields, like Earth's, undetected, enabling high-speed movement. This chapter concludes that plasma reactor technology, by understanding and manipulating magravs and the plasma dilution process, achieves effects that surpass the limitations of current science, opening new eras for energy, movement, and materials production. Chapter 27: Discussions and Conclusions. Friends, what we have discovered and demonstrated goes beyond any limits of known science. The fundamental truth is that the elementary particles that make up our universe are not what we thought. They are, in essence, dynamic plasma magnetic fields, PM. The interaction of these fields creates magravs, the gravitational and magnetic fields that give rise to matter. The state of this matter, whether visible, antimatter, or dark, simply depends on the intensity of these fields relative to their environment. For too long, humanity has lived under an ethic of burning and destruction. We have burned wood, oil, we have destroyed atoms to generate energy, and we have used the force to fly. This path has jeopardized our own future. With this new understanding, we show you the path of universal order. We do not need to burn or destroy. We need to learn to work within the structure of magnetic fields. We have proven these principles. We have demonstrated nuclear fusion without the Coulomb barrier, simply by equalizing the intensity of the fields. We have achieved lift and movement in our reactors by rebalancing the magravs with those of the Earth. We have seen the healing of chronic illnesses by modifying the imbalance of the body's magnetic fields, without the need to destroy germs or ingest pills. Our reactors are miniature universes. They can create whatever they need: water, oxygen, food, medicine, from the plasma that surrounds us in space, simply by reorganizing the fundamental fields. The proton, the basis of matter, is not an entity of material quarks. It is an integrated system of matter, antimatter, and dark matter coexisting. This technology is a turning point. The human being of the future will not destroy matter. They will learn to work with it, to obtain everything they need with less resource consumption, and to live in an environment of peace and balance. Welcome to the real world of creation. Chapter 28: Future Perspectives. This chapter concludes the work by projecting the profound impact of understanding plasma magnetic, PM, fields on the future of humanity, encompassing everything from biological life in the universe to space survival and technology. The diversity of life in the universe. Knowledge of magravs allows us to understand that life in the universe is not limited to Earth's nitrogen-based protein chain. Universal principles. Different life forms are based on the same fundamental principles of magnetic field equilibrium, albeit with different parameters in their protein chains. Potassium example. A life form could have potassium as its vital fluid base, instead of nitrogen. This potassium-based protein could be more efficient in its use of the universe's passive parameters, which could translate into greater intelligence. Appearance and prejudices. The difference would manifest in the color of the vital fluid and the external appearance. Potassium, with hydrogen and oxygen, could generate a silvery green color. The future demands that humanity abandon prejudices based on color and nationality, as the color of one's blood will simply be an indicator of origin, nothing more, nothing less. Transformative applications on Earth and in space. A full understanding of matter transitions provides scientific tools with massive implications. Health and nutrition. Disease eradication. Humans can utilize physiological energy to produce the precise energy, equivalent to their protein configuration, to restore the original physiological energy of their cells, freeing themselves from ailments without medication. Food by conversion. Reactors can directly convert the initial plasma of the universe into the necessary atoms and molecules of proteins and vitamins, without the need for soil. Space travel and colonization. Self-sufficiency in space. It will no longer be necessary to transport physical resources such as oxygen, water, or food. Humans will be able to produce any material at the point of demand: hydrogen, water, proteins, gold, steel, from plasma absorbed from the environment, using plasma dilution reactors. Defense and movement. Magrav plasma dilution reactors, GRAPOs, can create controlled, protective magnetospheric conditions around the ship with an intensity similar to Earth's magnetic field. Dark matter technology. Cloaking systems can be developed that operate with a morphological intensity balanced with the environment, making the ship appear as a source of dark energy or become dark/translucent, giving the impression of having moved position without physically doing so. The ultimate purpose. Knowledge of creation carries with it a responsibility. Ethical reality. Ethics of technology. The hope is that this technology will not be used for the destruction, death, or harm of any creature. Fundamental balance. Humankind must understand that, like matter in the universe, its own fundamental magnetic field structure is designed to share its internal components and transmit what others need to exist, even if this implies its own destruction. Intuition. The chapter concludes with a reflection. God has been the creator of everything, and humankind the transformer of something. The new technology offers the opportunity to understand the truth about oneself and the purpose of existence in the universe. Foundations of creation and the future. We have come to understand that our universe is built on a principle of magnetic balance, not destruction. Consider the half-life of an atom. Its decay, or half-life, is not a random event, but the result of the constant consumption of magnetic plasma energy, MPE. The proton and neutron use this energy for their internal motion and vibration. Once that predetermined energy is consumed, the disintegration becomes automatic. It's a natural cycle of energy leveling. With our reactors, we have entered the real world of creation. We can apply this knowledge to clean our environment. Through the decontamination system, we can separate CO2 with suitable matter, using the oxygen to produce pure water and the carbon to create diamond or industrial graphite. The concept has been tested. We have seen matter separate at the atomic level in the same system at room temperature. This is possible because the mass of an object, whether a planet or a cell, is simply the sum of its plasma magnetic fields, PMFs. The mass does not change as long as the entity remains intact. The planet's gravity, on the other hand, is the interaction of the PMFs generated in its core with the mass of external objects. We have solved the greatest challenges of physics with simplicity. Instead of fusing two plasmas in a tokamak, forcing them to overcome enormous barriers, we propose interatomic fusion, inducing the electron to return and fuse with its own nucleus. It is a more practical method, operating at low temperatures, and demonstrates that energy already exists within the atom's own structure. And when we look to space, our ships will be protected by defense and shielding technology. A high-saturation magnetic plasma pack launched from the ship can destroy any debris or asteroid at the molecular level, saturating it with energy. The object turns into magnetic vapor before it can touch us. We can do the same to protect Earth from any nearby object. Finally, dark matter is not a mystery. It is the fifth state of matter. It possesses mass, but it does not emit visible light. Its existence is manifested by its immense hidden gravity. Understanding its EMP is understanding the other side of creation. Friends, we are leaving the age of force and burning. We are entering the era of magnetic balance, where creation and protection are simply a function of field control. That's all for now. From the Keshe Hispanic team, we bid you farewell, filled with satisfaction at having shared Mr. Keshe's 3 major works in a practical and functional way with the rest of the community. We hope that the audiobooks of Mr. Keshe's 3 major works will serve as a tool that fosters a better integration and understanding of his teachings and workshops. Thankful for listening and for the quality of the information shared, we leave the universal order of the creation of matter to move on to the creation of light, and from there to the creation of the universe. With a basic understanding of the order of the creation of matter, the rest of Mr. Keshe's works and workshops become much easier. Thank you for everything, friends. Plasmic greetings. Happy field to all.